For millions of years, most humans and their ancestors lived a gatherer lifestyle in a tropical environment where large amounts of easy-to-pick fruit were readily available to meet their nutritional needs. The human diet was likely entirely plant-based and eaten without the application of fire or heat. Accordingly, the human digestive and eliminative tracts developed to process raw fruits and vegetables for fuel and growth. We are biologically designed to obtain our nutrition from uncooked fruits and vegetables. Only within the last 10,000 years has cereal agriculture allowed humans to trade their frugivorous diets for cooked grain-based fare. People's bodies remained the same, but the food they chose to eat began to vary for the worse. The human body has not had sufficient time, evolutionarily speaking, to alter its digestive system to meet this fundamental dietary change. Today I will be reading to you my highlights of Dr. Douglas Graham's The 80-10-10 Diet, balancing your health, your weight, and your life, one luscious bite at a time. Over and over again, I hear people saying they've tried everything to lose weight. Low fat, high fat, low carb, low protein, high protein, all kinds of pills, shots, powders, and shakes. You name it and they say they've tried it. The main cause of their failure is misinformation. There are reasons for each of these dietary failures. What they were told was low fat, usually 30%, actually is not low fat at all, and they have no idea how to get to an effective low fat 10% as described in this book. High fat diets can be dangerous and put you at risk for the diseases that most Westerners die from prematurely. I wrote this book for anyone who believes that appropriate body weight and vibrant well-being are their birthright as well as their responsibility, anyone willing to keep striving for the physique and the health they desire. Now, with the sample calculations in hand, I stand before the raw food community with clear evidence of the dangerously high fat consumption common in our ranks, and with a clearly articulated plan for those who wish to raise the bar a notch and reach for the ultimate low-fat plan for raw health. I have seen the sickest of the sick regain high levels of health and vitality simply by making intelligent food and lifestyle modifications. I have watched people pronounced terminally ill by the medical establishment heal themselves using the program described in this book. I have watched former world-class athletes rejuvenate themselves to the degree that they are once again achieving personal best performances. While in my experience consuming a 100% raw version of the 80-10-10 diet is optimal, other low or lower fat plant-centered diet programs also offer substantial health benefits, and many people find them to be the right choice for their lives. Americans have been told for more than 40 years that we are eating too much fat, yet our consumption of this nutrient has remained essentially unchanged during that time. 2/3 of all Americans are overweight, half of them obese. Because obesity is so common, few of us realize that our current view of normal body fat levels has been skewed to allow for several dozen extra pounds. 3 food groups, sweets and desserts, soft drinks and alcoholic beverages, comprise almost 25% of all calories consumed by Americans. Salty snacks and fruit-flavored drinks make up another 5%, bringing the total energy contributed by nutrient-poor foods to at least 30% of the total calorie intake. The standard American diet, SAD, is a sad testament to the rampant physical and mental decay of the most prosperous nations on earth. As our consumption of junk foods, animal products, chemical additives, toxic pesticides, and genetically modified organisms have increased, our health has plummeted. Obesity is the leading cause of all 3 of our top killers: heart disease, cancer, and stroke. Daily, we encounter an endless barrage of contradictory opinions and opposing interpretations of practically every aspect of nutritional science. Nutrition is so rife with conflicting theories that the so-called hard scientists, the physicists, mathematicians, physical chemists, and others frequently denigrate nutrition as not a real science. Confusion seems to be the only constant in weight management. Hordes of scientists, nutritionists, doctors, quote-unquote healers and lay people fill the bookstores and crowd the lecture circuit with convincing tales of the indispensable virtues of vitamins, essential fatty acids, antioxidants, enzymes, or some other silver bullet that is sure to ameliorate all of your health, aging, and weight issues. All of these parties defend their turf with a vengeance, and understandably so. Most of them have deep economic ties to their particular nutritional approach, complete with programs, supplements, superfoods, motivational seminars, pre-packaged meals, and a wide assortment of accessories. In this book, I share with you some salient bits from the body of knowledge called natural hygiene, literally the science of health. Information that changed my life and allowed me to coach thousands of people to attain the well-being, vitality, and physique they have always wanted. The natural hygiene approach to diet and nutrition is markedly different than the fragmented perspective that is common among health seekers and diet promoters. The fragmented view does not so much look at foods as it does their component parts. It also fails to distinguish true well-being from merely looking good, feeling good, or removing symptoms of disease, a grave error indeed. The fragmented approach extols the virtues of certain nutrients in a pick-and-choose fashion, the kind used in infomercial sales pitches. Excellently geared towards selling a specific product, this viewpoint never considers the full story, always omitting material that would give a more balanced view of the situation. In nature, calcium and all other nutrients come packaged in a very precise combination in plant foods, accompanied by hundreds, even thousands of other micronutrients that are designed to be consumed together. We cannot improve upon nature's pristine design by extracting and refining one or even a few dozen nutrients, removing them from the cofactors they naturally accompany, and produce a positive result. Anything short of whole plant foods, be they green juices, quote-unquote healthy oils, dehydrated, quote-unquote whole food supplements, or white powdered pharmaceutical grade, quote-unquote superfoods, always misses the mark, guaranteed. All we can hope to accomplish through eating refined fractional foods is satiation and compromised nutrition. All we can hope to achieve through supplementation with isolated nutrients is to relieve symptoms while creating further imbalances. People are incredulous when they first hear this. You mean if I get rid of my seizures, or tumors, or migraines, or candida, or lupus, or that doesn't mean I'm healthy? The answer is unequivocally no. If they continue the cycle of living in ways that created their health issues in the first place, and then attacking the inevitable symptoms with remedies and treatments, they set in motion the aforementioned shell game, repeatedly trading in one set of health complaints for another, seemingly unrelated complex of maladies, never getting closer to the goal of lasting, radiant health. To attain the big picture goal of gratifying work or lasting well-being, we must take positive action toward our desired result, not just negative action away from the condition we do not want, a fragmented solution at best. When we use remedies and therapies to eliminate symptoms, we do nothing to address their original cause, hence nothing to create health. We must educate ourselves about the cause of health, not disease, and include these in our daily routine. The big picture approach that I espouse is based on this simple concept. It is always better to correct a problem, to remove its cause, than it is to supplement or suppress it. This radically different view is unpopular because it does not generate any revenue. The 80-10-10 approach uses no repeat products, no supplements, no high-priced elitist superfoods. 80-10-10 uses a simple grocery store approach to nutrition that brings this program easily into the grasp of everyone. The paradox? Losing weight, feeling good, even ridding ourselves of intractable diseases does not necessarily mean we have become healthier. Heroin users feel good. So do coffee drinkers. So too do superfood evangelists. Junk food eating entertainers, anorexic runway models, and supplement-pounding bodybuilders may look good, but are any of these people nourishing their bodies on a cellular level? Are they eating whole, unrefined foods in the quantities and proportions on which their bodies were designed to thrive? Absolutely not. Determining our true dietary nature. Let us suppose that you were given a baby animal and you had no idea what it was or what it was supposed to eat. Perhaps it was a gift from a foreign land. How would you know what to feed it? The answer is relatively simple. All you would have to do is offer the creature different types of foods in their whole natural state. That which it was designed for, it would eat. It would likely ignore all the other items, not even considering them as food. Put the child in a room with a lamp and a banana. Sit back and watch to see which he plays with and which he eats. We can be fairly sure of the outcome. Try again with fats versus fruits by offering a choice of natural, raw, and unsalted nuts, seeds, avocados, or olives on the one hand, and any fresh sweet fruit on the other. Again, we can safely predict that the child will choose the sweet fruit. Our anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and psychology all indicate that we are not carnivores. Most of us love animals as fellow creatures on Earth. We do not salivate at the idea of crushing the life out of a rabbit with our bare hands and teeth, and the thought of eating one in a freshly killed state is repulsive. We certainly do not enjoy chewing on bones, gristle, entrails, chunks of raw fat and flesh, and the hair and vermin that inevitably accompany them. We cannot imagine slurping hot blood, getting it all over our faces, hands, and bodies. These behaviors are alien to our natural disposition and are actually sickening. We kill our animals by proxy, finding the actual carcass or corpse to be a thing of disgust. The vast majority of adults agree that if they had to kill the animals in order to eat, they would not eat meat ever again. We disguise animal flesh by eating only small cuts of the muscle and some organ meats. Even then, we prefer to cook them and camouflage them with condiments. We disguise the reality of meat by changing the names of the foods from what they really are to something more acceptable. We do not eat cow, pig, or sheep, but rather eat mutton, pork, ham, beef, steak, and veal. Stomach acid pH. The pH level of the hydrochloric acid that humans produce in their stomachs generally ranges about 3 to 4 or higher, but can go as low as 2.0, 0 being most acidic, 7 being neutral, and 14 most alkaline. The stomach acid of cats and other meat eaters can be in the 1+ range and usually runs in the 2s. Because the pH scale is logarithmic, this means the stomach acid of a carnivore is at least 10 times stronger than that of a human and can be 100 or even 1,000 times stronger. Despite the gross perversion of our instincts, they are still alive and well in most people and would reassert themselves should we be relegated back to nature. Therefore, this quest is to ascertain what we would eat in nature. Our instinctive foods, the foods that help to develop us to our magnificence, contain all that we need to thrive. We will evaluate whether each type is an appropriate food for us based on how that food occurs in nature without benefit of cooking equipment, tools, and containers. Remember, our instincts will reject or embrace each food on its merits, that is, its appeals to our senses and palate, the only criteria that guided our food selection in the ages past. Our premise is that nature served us correctly to start with. Humans are biologically equipped to supplement their diets with a wide variety of plant-based, quote-unquote vegetarian substances. Though we include vegetables in our diets, we are not primarily vegetable eaters by nature. And the divergent array of foods we commonly classify as such are not by any stretch of the imagination our primary ideal, natural source of fuel or other nutrients. Obviously, we're not herbivores. Starches can be divided into 3 general categories: grains, which are grass seeds, roots and tubers, and legumes. In nature, we would all reject grass seeds as foods. First, they grow in a form we can neither chew nor digest. Grain-eating birds possess a crop, a pouch in their throats or gullets, where the grains they swallow whole are allowed to germinate, thereby becoming digestible. Grains are indigestible raw, but even cooked, the complex carbohydrates in them require great digestive effort to break down. Even though most of the human race presently consumes grains and starches, we can reject them as natural human fare. The fact that grass seeds neither attract, tantalize, nor arouse us in their natural raw state should amply indicate to you that we were not granivores in nature before we mastered fire. Without tools, humans are very poor diggers. Further, they have no motivation to dig, for there are no foods below ground that in their natural state please the palate, and very few exist that our digestive systems can even handle. Some roots, notably turnips, rutabagas, sweet potatoes, yams, beets, carrots, parsnips, and salsify, can be eaten raw, though in practice today next to none are eaten this way. For humans, raw mature legumes are not just unpalatable, they are quite toxic. We simply have no capacity for consuming them in their natural state. Many creatures eat young legumes quite greedily. As it is in flesh, dairy, and eggs, the protein in legumes is rich in the amino acid methionine, which contains high amounts of the acidic mineral sulfur. The carbohydrate levels of legumes are also high enough to make them difficult to digest due to the high protein levels. Invariably, when eating legumes, humans get gassy, an indication that their digestive processes have been compromised. The lack of vitamin C, an essential nutrient for humans, also makes legumes a very poor food choice. From standpoints of taste, nutrition, digestion, and toxicity, legumes simply do not make a viable food option for humans. The human body produces salivary amylase, also called ptyalin, of extremely limited strength and in relatively low amounts, sufficient only to break down small amounts of starch, such as would be found in fruit that is not fully ripened. The body also produces small quantities of pancreatic amylase for somewhat limited starch digestion in the intestines. Substantially all Americans eat fermented and otherwise decomposed substances that are called foods. Most are derived from milk. Some are made from grains, especially the alcohols, fruits, wines and certain vinegars, legumes, especially the soybean and its suite of putrefactive products, and decomposed meats. Cheese represents about all the decomposition products in a single package: putrefactive proteins, fermented carbohydrates, and rancid fats. You need only to refer to a good dictionary to learn just how poisonous these substances are. Yet Americans eat billions upon billions of pounds of cheese annually. To assert that all these poisons going into the system cause anything less than sickness, disease, and debility is misrepresentation. Tumors and cancer are often the result. No other animals in nature drink the milk of another species. They know instinctively that the milk from their mothers is the perfect food to support their rapid growth and to provide the precise nutrient mix their developing bodies require. We are no more designed for cow's milk than for pig's milk or rat's milk or giraffe's milk, or vice versa. Milk drinking is pathogenic. If milk and milk products were discontinued today, millions of people would cease to suffer sicknesses and pathologies within a short period. As with all foods, we derive the greatest nutritional benefit from nuts and seeds when we eat them in their raw state. Heated fats and proteins are quite pathogenic, even carcinogenic. We should eat nuts raw or not at all. Most people in modern society, however, have never tasted truly raw nuts and seeds. High in water content, genuinely raw nuts have a texture more like apples in the case of almonds, or nut butters in the case of macadamias. Virtually all commercially available nuts and seeds have been oven dehydrated at quote-unquote low temperatures, perhaps 160 degrees Fahrenheit or 71 degrees centigrade, often for days, to prevent them from going moldy, thus extending their shelf life. Unfortunately, our ability to digest nuts and seeds, whether raw, dehydrated, or heated, is rather poor. We derive our best pre-digested fats adequate to meet our fatty acid needs from fruits and tender leaves. Biologically, we are not a species of fat eaters, but merely incidental eaters of fats. Although an occasional avocado or small handful of nuts and seeds is quite satisfying and complements our natural diet, we are primarily carbohydrate eaters. Without tools, technology, packaging, and containerization, and taste-masking agents, we would soon lose our omnivorous tendencies out in the wild, and wet, sweet fruit would look better and better every day. In nature, humans would be frugivores only. A frugivore is a creature that lives primarily on fruits, with the addition of tender greens. This includes the non-sweet seeded fruits we generally eat with vegetables, such as tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, okra, zucchini, and other squashes, and eggplant. Some people adopt a totally fruitarian diet, meaning they attempt to live exclusively on fruits, but I do not recommend this practice. Dark green leafy vegetables provide minerals and other nutrients essential for optimum nutrition and health. Humans are sweet seekers by nature, designed to eat sweet fruits. Taste buds on the very tips of our tongues recognize sweet tastes. Most of us are attracted to sweet fruits in their raw state, regardless of what else our culture and circumstances dispose us to eat. When ripened, fruits accommodatingly convert their carbohydrate components into glucose and fructose, simple sugars we can use without further digestion. Enzymes in the fruit convert proteins into amino acids and fats into fatty acids and glycerols. It is true that cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, kale, collards, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage are loaded with nutrients, including soluble fiber, but they also contain cellulose and other tough, difficult-to-digest fibers. The indigestible fibers in the harder textured vegetables are very difficult for our bodies to digest relative to the soft, soluble fibers in fruits and tender leafy greens. Thus, they are not among our ideal foods. The fruit requires no preparation. It is a finished product ready to be consumed exactly as nature prepared it. For humans, fruits attract the eye, tantalize the sense of smell, and taste divine in their raw, natural, ripe state. Allowing fruit to predominate in your diet makes succeeding on the 80-10-10 plan easier than any other approach to eating, raw or cooked. To develop the healthiest and sanest relationship with food, and in order to stick with a dietary plan that will work for you for the rest of your life, have all the fruit you care for to take you through your breakfast and lunch meals. Even your vegetable meals should begin with fruit as much as you like until you are certain that you will not crave sweets at the end of the meal. Meeting fruit concerns head on. Do you know anybody whose Candida was caused by eating fruit? Do you know anybody whose diabetes was caused by eating fruit? Do you know anybody whose cancer was caused by eating fruit? If eating fruit didn't cause these maladies, why would you believe that avoiding fruit would correct them? Eating a diet of mostly fruit, including generous amounts of fresh, sweet fruit, does not create high blood sugar. Not when you are eating a low-fat diet, that is. When the system is not gummed up with excess fat, the sugar from even high glycemic food moves easily in and then out of the blood. Blood sugar levels in a healthy individual do not vary much in spite of changes in the diet. The glycemic index measures carbohydrate quality but not quantity. The glycemic load is calculated by multiplying a food's glycemic index value by the amount of available carbohydrate per serving, in grams of carbohydrates less fiber, then dividing by 100. Thus, fruits, which are mostly water, have a low glycemic load even though they rate high on the glycemic index. For example, bananas rate 52 on the glycemic index, where glucose equals 100. But because water accounts for 75% of the weight of a banana, its glycemic load is only 12. All fruits fall into low or medium categories on glycemic load/glycemic index charts, with the exception of watermelon, whose GI ranks barely high. It is best to eat fruit fresh, as drying and dehydrating both concentrate fruit sugars to an unnatural level that the body is not designed to handle. It is also important to eat fruit whole, not juiced, as the fiber in fruit slows sugar absorption to its natural speed. In all cases, and with all foods, whole, fresh, ripe, raw, and unprocessed is the way to go. When fruits are eaten whole, with their fiber intact, as part of a low-fat diet, their sugars do indeed enter the bloodstream relatively quickly, but then they also exit it just as quickly, making them the ideal food, one that provides the perfect fuel for human consumption. The raw food movement is renowned for its use of great quantities of nuts, seeds, avocados, olives, flax and olive oil, coconuts, and other high-fat foods. On a high-fat diet, whether cooked or raw, people experience nutritional deficiencies, plummeting energy, hormone imbalances, intense cravings, and mood swings. Everything goes haywire, not the least of which is blood sugar. To be used as fuel for our cells, the sugars we eat travel a 3-stage journey through our bodies. Stage 1. Sugars start out in the digestive tract when we eat them. Stage 2. They pass through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. Stage 3. They then move smoothly and easily out of the bloodstream and into our cells. This occurs rapidly, often in minutes. When we eat a high-fat diet, the sugar gets trapped in stage 2, and the body works overtime, sometimes to the point of exhaustion and disease, in an effort to move the sugar out of the bloodstream. Meanwhile, the sugar bags up in the blood, causing sustained elevated sugar that wreaks havoc on the body in the form of Candida, fatigue, diabetes, etc. Excess dietary fat in the bloodstream creates some negative insulating effects. When we eat too much fatty food, a thin coating of fat lines the blood vessel walls, the cell's insulin receptor sites, the sugar molecules, as well as the insulin itself. These fats can take a full day or more to clear from the blood, all the while inhibiting normal metabolic activity and preventing these various structures from communicating with each other. Thus, too much fat in the blood impedes the movement of sugar out of the bloodstream. Meat, compared to the amount of blood sugar it releases, seems to cause the most insulin secretion of any food tested. Out of the 4, Weight Watchers, the Zone Diet, the Atkins Diet, and the Ornish Diet, Ornish's vegetarian diet, almost all carbohydrates, was the only one to significantly lower insulin, 27%, even though that's supposedly what the Zone and Atkins, very little carbohydrates diets, were designed to do. Eating a high-fat diet, cooked or raw, contributes not peripherally, but directly and causally to all of the misleadingly named blood sugar metabolic disorders. Given this new perspective, one might more accurately classify these diseases as lipid metabolic disorders. Fruit eaten alone or in simple, well-chosen combination on an empty stomach requires only a few minutes in the stomach before passing to the small intestines, where the sugars can be quickly absorbed. Most of the sugar from fruit travels from the intestines to the bloodstream and then to the cells where they are needed within minutes of its consumption. Fats, however, require a much longer period of time, often 12 to 24 hours or more, before they reach their destination, the cells. In the stomach, fats are subjected to a digestive process that usually takes several hours. When they finally do proceed to the small intestine, they are absorbed into the lymphatic system, where they often spend 12 hours or more before passing to the bloodstream. Most important, fats linger in the bloodstream for many hours longer than do sugars. On a high-fat diet, therefore, the bloodstream always contains an excessive quantity of fat, and more is coming in at almost every meal. Essentially, even when you eat a fruit meal alone and wait hours before eating fat, these sugars are likely to mix in your bloodstream with the fats you ate the day before. If we eat a high-fat diet for a long enough period of time, the pancreas begins to fail at producing sufficient insulin to maintain healthy blood sugar levels. Rather than the typical gentle rise and fall fluctuations in blood sugar, we begin to experience increasingly higher peaks and deeper valleys. Blood sugar levels become unstable due to the overconsumption of fat in the diet. This sets up a situation where most of us rely upon adrenal-assisted pancreatic function virtually every time we eat, placing constant excessive demand upon both our pancreas and adrenals. This excessive adrenal demand, coupled with the high stress of our American lifestyle, result in such extreme overuse of the adrenals that they eventually begin to fail. The symptoms of severe adrenal fatigue are referred to collectively as chronic fatigue. When children eat great quantities of sugar on birthdays, Halloween, and other occasions, they set off a particularly vigorous version of the chain reaction I've described in this chapter. The fats remaining in their bloodstreams from their previous day's meals block insulin function just as effectively as they do in adults. Then their young and not yet exhausted adrenal glands kick in with a jolt, releasing a good amount of epinephrine. The next thing you know, the children are running wild. Candida is a form of yeast, an organism that naturally occurs in human blood. It is supposed to be there. This microbe consumes sugar for its food. If fat levels stay chronically elevated due to a fat-rich diet, sugar remains in the bloodstream and feeds the large Candida colonies instead of feeding the 18 trillion cells of the body. Starved for fuel, these cells can no longer metabolize energy. You become tired and feel run down. It is important to understand the implications of a rise in blood sugar level. If the body is not able to re-establish normal blood sugar levels, a dangerous situation exists. The only mechanisms that remain for bringing the blood sugar back down is the Candida. The Candida microbe in our blood is actually a life-saving organism. one that we do not ever want to eradicate. Outbreaks of Candida are your wake-up call, a warning that your system is rapidly approaching diabetes and that you would do well to drastically curtail your fat consumption or face dire health consequences. The Candida microbe is extremely short-lived. If folks suffering from Candida would simply follow a low-fat diet, most of them would find that their Candida issues were completely gone in a matter of just a few days. Of course, they may still have the underlying pancreatic and adrenal fatigue issues to resolve. Health comes only from healthful living. 5% of diagnosed diabetics are designated type 1, formerly juvenile diabetics. From birth, the pancreas of these individuals is unable to produce adequate amounts of insulin for the metabolism of glucose. Although glucose is present, it remains trapped in the bloodstream. The remaining 95% of diabetics are classified as type 2, formerly adult onset diabetes. In the vast majority of these cases, the pancreas produces adequate to excessive levels of insulin, but glucose is nonetheless unable to enter the cells. This is in large part a result of the high-fat American diet, which hinders the functioning of both natural and injected insulin. Diabetics of both types endure an array of increasingly debilitating symptoms, ranging from frequent urination to unquenchable thirst, excessive hunger, sudden weight loss, weakness and fatigue, reduced concentration and coordination, blurred vision, irritability, recurrent infections, numbness in the extremities, and slow healing of cuts and bruises. Diabetes is but a natural stepping stone on the low-carb, high-fat path to health devastation. Although not all diabetics experience chronic fatigue and candidiasis, these conditions are manifestations of the same underlying condition, high blood fat. Foods high in fat were responsible for the onset of diabetes in the mice, whereas sugar had no effect at all on diabetes symptoms. The press release states, quote, "Without the fat, the diabetes does not occur, even in diabetes-prone mice. When the high-fat diet is stopped in mice that have been raised on it, the diabetes disappears," unquote. The use of a low-fat, raw vegan diet predominated by sweet fruit has resulted in stabilization of blood sugar metabolism. Most of my clients were able to completely eliminate their need for insulin and other related drugs within a few weeks or less. Eating whole, raw fruit only results in sustained high blood sugar if you are also eating high fat. That is, elevated triglycerides cannot arise from a blood sugar condition that does not exist. A high-fruit, low-fat diet has only a positive effect on triglycerides. Cancer is proving to be a disease of lifestyle, environment, and culture, and not a condition caused by a microbe, germ, or genetic factor. The multifaceted causation theory is gaining more popular acceptance, yet researchers continue to look for one specific cause. Somehow a popular notion among the mainstream warns that fruit is bad for anyone with cancer, whereas yet many misinformed raw food quote-unquote experts, theoretically the champions of fruit and vegetable consumption, parrot the mainstream directive to avoid fruit, a travesty that produces emaciated, unbalanced, binge-prone raw fooders who give the movement a poor reputation. The quote-unquote success of both chemotherapy and radiation treatments depends upon a lowering of immune function in the body. Medical professionals know that people with suppressed immunity can tolerate treatments that are otherwise completely unthinkable. Recognizing the immunity-strengthening qualities of fruit, I have heard of instances where doctors recommend against its consumption for the very people who need it most. Naturally, the real solution is to work with patients to build vigorous health so they never find themselves in the intractable predicament of choosing between their vitality and their life. Many people mistakenly assume that the sugar in fruits, and especially the acid in acid fruits, will acidify the body. The chemistry of digestion demonstrates that this is not so. The mineral content of a food is the primary determining factor as to whether the food produces an alkaline or an acid reaction in the body. Once the food has been digested, if acid minerals predominate, as they do in meats and most nuts and seeds, for instance, the food will be said to have an acid reaction in the body or to be acid forming. Since alkaline minerals predominate in almost all fruits, including the acid fruits, it is safe to say that fruit has an alkalizing effect upon the body. Fruits may not be as alkalizing as greens, but their reputation as acidifying foods is unfounded. Most of our body fluids and cells require a neutral to slightly alkaline environment, a pH reading in the high 6 to low 7 range, in order to be healthy. By design, even if we live and eat very healthfully, our cells tend to acidify due to normal daily activities and stresses. Nature, in her infinite wisdom, set it up so that our natural diet of alkalizing raw fruits and vegetables would neutralize those acids. If the vast majority of our foods are alkaline forming, we can easily live in a state of balance or homeostasis. If we overwhelm our bodies with unnatural sources of acidity, there is no amount of raw fruit and vegetables that can compensate. What kinds of activities and practices acidify us in this way? Consuming cooked foods, heated fats, animal-derived foods, grains, cooked or raw, or more than a very small amount of nuts and seeds. Eating poorly combined foods, cooked or raw. Smoking or taking any drugs or stimulants, including caffeine. Drinking alcohol, carbonated drinks, coffee or tea. Lack of exercise, insufficient rest and sleep. Sustained stress, anger, fear, or other negative emotions. Cancer cells, like all other cells, use glucose as their primary fuel, but it is not possible to starve cancer cells of their fuel without also starving all other cells, including vital brain, heart, liver, and kidney cells. Of course, to do so would be counterproductive and in fact deadly. Cancer cells thrive in an anaerobic environment, meaning one where the oxygen content is very low. Eating a high-fat diet decreases the oxygen content of the blood and tissues and creates an ideal environment for cancer cells to flourish. When we consume a diet such as 80-10-10, which is high in simple carbohydrates and water, we effectively raise the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, thus vastly reducing the likelihood that we will create cancer. When a person eats a healthy, simple meal, it generally leaves the stomach rapidly, usually in less than an hour. Difficult to digest foods can be held in the stomach for 24 hours and longer. When a person eats such food for dinner, they are generally still sitting in his or her stomach the next morning. Should he then have fruit for breakfast, an extremely volatile and incompatible combination is formed, and acid stomach is often the result. Not surprisingly, most people then blame the fruit they ate for the acid condition they experience. Ask a dentist what percentage of his or her patients have problems with their teeth because they ate too much fruit. The percentage will be so low as to approach zero. So what exactly is it that results in tooth decay? Good evidence is emerging that much of today's tooth and gum disease is actually caused by the quote-unquote preventative procedures that we have been taught to give our teeth. Aggressive brushing of the gums can wear them away, resulting in receding gums. Gums are soft and can decay quickly when treated roughly. Receded gums expose the roots of the teeth, which have no enamel and hence no protection from the acids in foods or those produced by bacteria. Flossing the gums, rather than gently flossing only the spaces between the teeth, can also be detrimental. Improper flossing can irritate the gums and result in unnatural enlargement of the pockets between the teeth and gums. Food and microbes can then be caught in the pockets and wreak havoc on our teeth. Even toothpaste can have a damaging effect upon the teeth. The particulate matter in toothpaste that is designed to scrub the teeth can eventually wear through the tooth enamel. The particles in the toothpaste can lodge between tooth and gums, causing irritation and resultant inflammation. Conservative dentists today recommend using only a soft brush that has been wet with water to thoroughly clean teeth without damaging them. It appears that dehydrated foods have the most profound negative effect on teeth in several different ways. Dried fruit qualifies as a refined carbohydrate as the water has been removed from what was once a whole food. In this fractional form, fruit is extremely dry and sticky. It sticks aggressively to the first wet surfaces it contacts, your teeth. Stuck in the crevices, crannies, and corners of teeth, dried fruit will eventually be broken down by bacteria designed to do exactly that job. The bacteria, unfortunately for your teeth, produce an extremely acidic metabolic waste product, and they excrete that waste directly onto your teeth. The acid in the bacterial excrement essentially dissolves your tooth enamel. This acid is extremely damaging to the roots of teeth, should any be exposed. Continued exposure to this acid will result in the development of tooth decay. The pH of the mouth is usually in the alkaline range when we are in a healthy condition. After testing the saliva of hundreds of clients after they ate nuts or seeds, I have found that the mouth often becomes slightly acidic. This acid works to chemically break down the proteins in the nut and seed particles, while it also adversely affects the roots and the enamel of our teeth. Once again, cavities eventually form. Complex carbohydrates, as well as refined simple carbohydrates, stick to the teeth in a similar fashion to dehydrated fruit. The bacteria that digest the carbohydrates also produce acid waste products that corrode tooth enamel. Most complex carbohydrate foods are acid-forming foods. The solution to healthy teeth and gums is the solution to health overall. Healthful living has no contraindications. Whole, fresh, ripe, raw fruits and vegetables are excellent foods for teeth and gums. Our dental structure, as well as the rest of our anatomy and physiology, are all designed for fruits and vegetables. Raw food for ultimate health. Unheated or raw foods are the natural and optimal choice for the cellular health of all creatures. One of the major differences between people and the other animals on planet Earth is that we cook our food and they do not. Where our health is concerned, this is not a good thing. Raw foods make a lot of common sense, and the sciences completely support the raw food concept. Unfortunately, the doctors and scientists who study nutrition, for the most part, are cooked food eaters, and they see the world through a cooked food perspective. They cannot see beyond their accustomed view to envision another approach. In general, the animals that suffer from degenerative quote-unquote human diseases are domesticated or caged ones that are routinely fed cooked food by their human caretakers. If we observe nature, we will find that all creatures are born with or develop everything they need to secure their natural food. No human has yet been born with a stove on his back or the keys to a tractor in her hand. The raw food movement was almost as big 120 years ago as it is today, if not more so. But the whole concept was essentially shot down with a single word: germs. After scientist Louis Pasteur, 1822 to 1895, published his germ theory of disease in 1878, fear of microbes developed into a full-blown phobia for many people, one that lives on and continues to grow to this day. This fear led the medical fraternity to suggest that all foods be cooked for the safety of the consumer. People began cooking their apples, their tomatoes, essentially everything they ate. In more than 100 years, the germ theory of disease has yet to be proven as fact, while having been disproved repeatedly by Koch's postulates. The germ theory of disease is destined to remain a theory forever, for it takes very little effort to find evidence refuting Koch's postulates. Here are two of the more obvious examples. Healthy people often harbor the germs that are said to cause one disease or another while remaining totally symptom-free. This fact stands in opposition to postulate number one. Conversely, many people with a given disease have been shown not to be hosting the alleged causative agent, also refuting postulate number one. Maintaining our inner terrain in a healthy, undisturbed, and undeteriorated state of homeostasis is one of the key benefits we derive from eating a low-fat diet of whole, raw plant foods in their freshest, least processed form. The viruses and bacteria that feed upon the toxic wastes inside of us simply move on and cease to be a problem when we clean up our diets and other sources of inner pollution. At this point, our bodies are no longer capable of acting as hosts for such pathogens. Experiments have shown that people can survive on diets as restricted as flour and water, at least for a period of time, but they cannot thrive on such a regimen. This is a testament to the nutritional reserves, resilience, and vitality of the body, not to the nutritional value of the food. The difference between normal health and actually thriving is vast. Historically, as pre-human hominids moved away from the tropics, they started eating the cooked flesh of animals and experimenting with foods such as cooked tubers and other complex carbohydrates to substitutes for unavailable fruits and vegetables. Evidence tells us this practice has been going on for at least 200,000 years. However, it was only with the advent of grain agriculture in the past 10,000 years that we began deriving the vast majority of our calories from cooked carbohydrates. Any adaptations to the nutritional losses or the toxins created by cooking foods could only be considered devolution rather than evolution. Many foods that are cooked, such as meats and grains, would otherwise be unappetizing or inedible to humans. Cooking makes it possible for us to eat and to call good food we would otherwise consider have gone bad. On certain rare occasions, cooking might enable us to sustain ourselves on the only foods available to us. To be sure, however, we pay with our health when we cook foods as a regular practice. High fat content is another common problem with cooked foods. In particular, meats, grains, and other starchy foods often contain far more fat than is healthful. The fat is not always visible, however. It is absorbed into starchy foods in the cooking process. To varying degrees, the different methods of cooking introduce toxic substances that the body must eliminate. The repeated consumption of cooked food results in a detrimental enlargement of the pancreas, as well as damage to the liver, heart, thyroid gland, adrenals, and most other organs as a result of toxic exposure combined with reduced oxygen availability. Studies have shown that our immune system often reacts to the introduction of cooked food to the bloodstream in the same way it does to foreign pathogens, such as bacteria, viruses, and fungi. The body literally attacks the food, sending an army of white blood cells to do the job. Heated foods are nutritionally inferior, which is one of the reasons people commonly overeat cooked food. Their stomachs feel full, but their cells crave nutrients and remain nutritionally starved. Foods can only withstand about as much heat as your hand or the roof of your mouth can take before their nutrients are irrevocably damaged. Few people realize that high-temperature cooking denatures the proteins in foods, fusing the amino acids together with enzyme-resistant bonds that preclude them from being fully broken down, thus rendering the proteins substantially useless and in fact toxic to us. All proteins that we consume must be broken down into single individual amino acids before they can be of any use to us. Our digestive enzymes cannot easily break down coagulated protein molecules once they fuse together. The best they can accomplish is partial breakdown into polypeptides. The body recognizes clumps of partially broken down proteins known as polypeptides as foreign invaders to be attacked, contained, and eliminated through the kidneys. The cell walls of the kidneys do not allow for easy transport of these substances, and their buildup causes the distress that leads to kidney stones and eventually to kidney failure. Undigested proteins also produce allergies, arthritis, leaky gut syndrome, and other autoimmune disorders. We must heat starchy carbohydrates to dextrinize them, thus facilitating their breakdown into glucose. Unfortunately, heating caramelizes these complex carbohydrates foods, fusing their molecules into a sticky, molasses-like goo. The body can realize only perhaps 70% of the energy potential of cooked starchy foods. Blood sugar levels predictably spike after we eat cooked carbohydrate foods, especially grains that have had their fiber refined out of them. Heat the carbohydrates further and they will char or blacken, as happens to burnt toast. This blackened carbohydrate is toxic and known carcinogen. The digestion of cooked complex carbohydrates is typically impaired by the fatty and sugary foods with which they are consumed, leading to fermentation. The byproducts of fermentation are gas, alcohol, and acetic acid. Mainstream science is tying itself in knots over a lethal poison called acrylamide, recently discovered to be produced in high carbohydrate foods by the chemistry of cooking. This potent chemical killer was found in high concentrations in the food supply. Heated fats interfere with cell respiration, leading to cancer and heart disease. Heating fats also reduces the functional value of their antioxidant properties. Once fats have been cooked, they quickly go rancid, at which point they become carcinogenic. When unsaturated vegetable fats and oils are heated to such temperatures, and especially when polyunsaturated oils are repeatedly reheated, as in fast food deep fry establishments, their naturally occurring cis bonds are converted to trans bonds, creating trans fatty acids. Trans fats are recognized as one of the most dangerous dietary health hazards of our time. Food manufacturers hydrogenate unsaturated fats to extend shelf life and improve food texture by heating them and exposing them to hydrogen while they are under pressure. In terms of volume, water is our greatest nutrient need, second only to oxygen. Cooking drives water out of food and alters it drastically. Dehydration oxidizes the nutrients in food, and their nutrient value is duly degraded. For every nutrient that becomes more bioavailable due to the cooking process, countless other nutrients become less so. We don't know for certain, however, that even the ones that become more available are doing us any favors once altered by heat. More important, this viewpoint assumes that more of a nutrient is better, instead of trusting that nature has provided the perfect balance of nutrients we need for optimal health in the fresh, raw plant foods we eat. A proper raw diet eliminates constipation, and the transit time of waste matter shortens to 24 hours or less, eliminating the toxemia that occurs as the colon recycles toxins. Most people in the standard American diet experience transit times of 72 hours or more, during which time their food ferments and putrefies inside them. The resulting foul gas and unpleasant-smelling feces highlight the putrefaction caused by anaerobic bacteria breaking down undigested proteins in the colon. These rotting proteins are said to lead to various forms of colon disease, including polyps, colitis, and cancer. Many people on a raw diet, even the high-fat way, lose some excess weight and experience clearer sinuses, improved breathing, better sleep, clearer skin, less mucus discharge, increased energy, and heightened mental clarity. Cleaner blood and healthier red blood cells better transport fresh oxygen to all the cells in the body, resulting in heightened mental clarity and allowing subtle healing to take place within the body that may not be easily noticed. If you follow the raw vegan version of the 80-10-10 diet to the letter, including the elimination of all forms of salt and condiments, you will lose any remaining excess fat and water weight, but not healthy lean tissue. It's important to make sure you're eating enough calories, however, as foods with fewer calories per bite require more bites. People who take their diets all the way to low-fat raw vegan, 80-10-10 raw vegan, experience markedly fewer colds, flus, and aches than people who eat a high-fat diet, raw or cooked. The switch from cooked to raw is actually a fairly easy one. It is simply a matter of increasing the percentage of raw foods in your diet. Some people find it easiest to begin by simply eating raw for breakfast while leaving everything else the same way as always. When they get comfortable with that, they add in raw lunches as well. In time, the raw dinner becomes a realistic challenge. Other folks prefer to start meals raw but finish with cooked, gradually increasing the amount of raw food that is eaten at the beginning of the meal until finally they are eating some meals that are completely raw. Eventually, you will come to love the raw foods and their effects upon the way you look and feel. At some point, you may begin to question why you are still eating the cooked foods at all. Sure, you love them. The question is, do they love you back? Cooked foods eventually show themselves for what they truly are, health destroyers. Though you may find that you have many emotional attachments to your cooked food, in due time you will come to no longer look at cooked food as a treat. Detoxification symptoms are generally mild, but can range from uncomfortable to downright miserable. They are really a cause for celebration, however, as any discomfort in the present is sure to be less severe and of shorter duration than the disease it would have become in the future. The secondary effect of stimulation is sedation. Thus, it is common to feel tired when a person first attempts the raw diet. It is not that the raw diet is making them tired, it is that they are actually coming down off of the influence of coffee, refined sugars, meats, and other stimulating foods. The duration degree of detoxification will vary. Detox can be intense or mild and can last from a few days to several years, depending on the individual's health, vitality, environment, and the degree to which one follows a healthy lifestyle. If a food cannot be eaten with joy and delight to individuals in normal good health and who have an unperverted sense of taste, then the food must be considered to be of low quality. Eating should be a gustatory delight. If a whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic food is a taste delight, it is perfect. A normal white count is around 3 million. If toxic substances enter the bloodstream, the white blood cell count will rise rapidly and dramatically in order to clean up the blood. After eating a cooked meal, the white count typically rises as high as 15 or even 18 million and even higher. After eating a meal of raw fruit, there is usually no discernible rise in the white count. So the rule is this: if we can't eat the food raw, if it is not delicious and palatable in its natural living state, it is not food for us. Foods to which we humans are ideally adapted require a minimum of vital energy for their digestion and assimilation. To be of greatest value to us, foods must be efficiently digested and assimilated. The water and sugars of fruit, which make up almost its entire digestible portion, require virtually no digestion whatever. They simply require absorption. Shortly after their absorption, they are very easily and rapidly assimilated. We should never take more than 4 or 5 foods at a single properly prepared and combined meal. Almost no preparation other than cleansing is necessary, but we must make sure to eat in strictly compatible combinations. The ideal is a single food per meal. To really simplify the digestive process and to assure ourselves of easy digestion on a continuing basis, we may select a rather narrow range of foods according to the season and stick with them. For instance, we may make one meal a day of just bananas with some lettuce and celery, and another meal of a salad with citrus and nuts. This can go on day after day in the winter season. In summer, we might have melon rather consistently for just one meal, and at a second meal of the day, mangoes, peaches, or other summer fruit, and a green salad with tomato. The objective is to eat a diet to which we are biologically adapted that gives the highest potential for wonderful health. Green leaves possess the highest and most complete range of micronutrients. This is one of the primary reasons we must have them often in our diet for the best health. Of course, the body is provident. Missing them on occasion is not particularly harmful and would not prove disastrous unless we miss them for some length of time, usually months or more. A variety of fruits and vegetables eaten throughout the year will easily guarantee nutritional sufficiency. Understanding the caloric-nutrient ratio. We get our calories from 3 sources: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. I refer to these as calorinutrients. I list all ratios in my writings in the same order: carbohydrates, proteins, fats, CPF for short, separated by slashes. Thus, 80-10-10 is shorthand for 80% carbohydrates, 10% protein, and 10% fat. The Goldilocks approach to nutrition: for best results, you don't want too much of any nutrient, and you don't want too little. You want the amount to be just right. That amount, I assert, at least in terms of calorinutrients, turns out to be 80-10-10, a minimum of 80% of your calories from carbohydrates, primarily from whole, sweet fruit, and a maximum of 10% protein and 10% fat. On the 80-10-10 plan, a person who eats 2,000 calories a day would shoot for approximately 1,600 of those calories to come from carbohydrates, 200 from protein, and 200 from fat. Eating foods of low caloric density, such as fruits and vegetables, has been cited as a probable method of extending longevity. Experts in the field of human longevity have long held that refraining from overeating is the surest method of extending the lifespan, as it most effectively reduces the likelihood of obesity. One very healthful method of not overeating is to increase caloric demand by raising activity levels while eating primarily fruits and vegetables, foods that are relatively low in calories per bite. Like high-performance race cars, the human body is designed to get its best results from a very specific fuel mixture. Think about it. Can you find any example in nature of a mammalian species whose individual members eat foods from completely different categories based upon their blood type, their geographical location, their metabolic type, or any other factor? All of the creatures that are anatomically and physiologically like us, known as the anthropoid primates, gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, and bonobos, thrive on a low-fat diet that is predominated by fruits and vegetables. Their caloric-nutrient ratios closely approximate 80-10-10. The actual foods humans eat differ according to season, geography, availability, personal preference, etc., but not according to anything pertaining to our physiology. The total number of calories each person needs varies according to many factors, including gender, size, age, activity level, fitness goals, health status, and so forth. But the ratio of carbohydrates to protein to fats we need remains relatively the same. Recognizing that calculating percentage of calories produces a vastly different caloric-nutrient ratio than percentage of weight, percentage of dry weight, percentage of volume, etc., making sure you are comparing apples to apples, so to speak, is an important factor when evaluating other programs in relation to the 80-10-10 diet. Consider a salad made of just 2 ingredients, 6 cups of lettuce and a quarter cup of almonds. As this table shows, the almonds account for just 4% of the volume, but surprisingly to many, nearly 80% of the calories. Also called the low-fat raw vegan diet, 80-10-10 raw vegan presents you with a life-changing opportunity to partake exclusively of nature's bounty, consuming only whole, fresh, unprocessed, and undressed plant foods in the form Mother Earth presents them to us. I have eaten substantially this way and used the 80-10-10 raw vegan program as it has evolved with clients for more than 20 years, with astonishing results. This approach to diet and nutrition has proven over that time to be the healthiest dietary regimen known to man. Various sources suggest that Americans consume 40 to 50% of the calories from carbohydrates, about 16% protein, and about 35 to 45% fat. After 20 years of doing dietary analysis for my clients, I have observed that 42-16-42 is typical for most people. As this book explains, most of us in the US, even vegetarians and vegans, tend to gravitate toward this 42-16-42 average, a proportion that provides far less fuel, carbohydrate, than our bodies need in order to thrive, and a seriously dangerous level of fat. Raw fooders, for the most part, are consuming astonishing levels of fat, sometimes twice that of the fast food eating mainstream. Naturally, cooked fat carries with it a host of problems not present in raw fats, but high levels of either can wreak tremendous havoc with our health. I encourage you to take the time to learn to use a nutrient analysis tool, at least for a short while. Perhaps the most important use of these automated calculators is to make sure you get enough calories for your size and activity level. This is of critical importance, as undereating in terms of calories is one of the main reasons that people fail to thrive on a high-produce diet. Even when you have the 80-10-10 concept down to a science, you will never eat in that ratio at every meal, nor even every day, nor should you. In reality, you will eat more fat on some days and less on others. The goal is to eat 80-10-10 as an average for an entire year or more. Once you have done that, I'd wager you will never look back. Carbohydrate, 80% minimum. Insufficient carbohydrate in the diet leads to an array of health concerns, primary among which are eating disorders, severe food cravings, lethargy, weakness, and all of the conditions associated with the overconsumption of fats. As we increase protein intake above 10% of daily calories, we start seeing low energy and increased acid toxemia, a precursor for osteoporosis, kidney disease, arthritis, immune dysfunction, and cancer. Eating substantially more than 10% of daily calories from fat can lead to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, cancer, and many other maladies. Carbohydrates are by far the easiest to convert to useful sugars. Glucose, a simple sugar, is the primary preferred source of fuel for every tissue and cell of our bodies. In fact, some of our cells, the brain, red blood cells, and some nervous tissue, for example, depend almost exclusively on glucose as their fuel source. The term energy is defined as a low-voltage electrical current produced by your brain during sleep, which runs through your body via your nervous system, also known as vital nerve energy. When you are awake, you use nerve energy more rapidly than the brain can produce it, hence you eventually run out of energy. After an appropriate period of hours procuring sleep, you awaken, fully recharged and full of nerve energy again. On the other hand, food is referred to as fuel. We need to consume fuel for 3 primary reasons: nutrition, hydration, and pleasure. Through the process of digestion, we quote-unquote burn our fuel, food, to release its own energy potential and utilize it for ourselves. During this complicated process, we receive a net gain in energy by using our own nerve energy to release the potential in food. Humans have little or no capacity for storing excess protein or excess carbohydrate, but we can convert both to fat stores for later use as fuel. When we do not eat sufficient carbohydrates to meet our fuel needs, our bodies break down stored fats into glucose through a complex chemical process called gluconeogenesis, literally the creation of new sugar. While this can be a life-saving process in times of hardship, in the absence of sufficient carbohydrates, gluconeogenesis results in the production of byproducts known as ketones. Circulating in the bloodstream, ketones adversely affect our decision-making abilities because they exert an influence upon the brain chemistry similar to that of alcohol. Monosaccharides are the only carbohydrates that can be absorbed directly into the bloodstream through the intestinal lining. Our digestive system easily breaks down disaccharides into their monosaccharide constituents. Simple carbohydrates come in two forms: refined sugars, extracted from fruits, grains, tubers, and sugarcane, and whole food sugars, the sugars found in whole, fresh plant foods, primarily sweet fruits. Both refined and whole food simple sugars taste sweet to the tip of the tongue. Unfortunately, widespread misinformation and general ignorance about nutrition causes the great majority of the population to equate simple carbohydrates with the nutritionally bankrupt refined sugars. Complex carbohydrates found in grains and other starchy foods do not taste sweet, even though they are made from chains of sugars. Complex carbohydrates are more difficult to digest than simple carbohydrates. If your daily caloric pie is made of only 3 slices, carbohydrate, protein, and fat, and you decrease one of them, one or both of the other 2 must increase. People generally believe that the decrease in carbohydrates in their low-carb meals is offset by an increase in protein. This is incorrect. As I describe in the protein chapter, only exceedingly rarely does anyone eat even a quarter of daily calories as protein. The balance of our daily calories, at least 80%, must come from some combination of carbohydrates and fat. Claiming to have reviewed every study ever done on low-carb diets, they concluded, quote, "In all cases, individuals on high-fat, low-carbohydrate diets lose weight because they consume fewer calories," unquote. When one is eating enough carbohydrates, fat can be completely broken down as well. But when one's body runs out of carb fuel to burn, its only choice is to burn fat inefficiently using a pathway that produces toxic byproducts, like acetone and other so-called ketones. The kidney uses minerals such as potassium and calcium to help rid one's body of toxins like ketones. People on the Atkins diet are urinating these minerals away, and critically low levels in the blood of these electrolytes can lead to fatal cardiac arrhythmias, lethal heart rhythms. We pay a huge price in terms of health and optimum functioning whenever we force our bodies to resort to fat, or worse, to protein, to fuel our cells, as these conversions are chemically inefficient compared with using carbohydrate for fuel. The vast majority of diet and nutrition experts whose patients and clients consistently experience reversal of degenerative disease, however, including renowned medical doctors like Dean Ornish, John McDougall, Michael Clapper, Cadwell Esselstyn, Neil Barnard, Joel Furman, Matthew Lederman and his wife Alona Poldy, and Michael Greger, as well as professionals at the world-renowned Pritikin Longevity Center, recommend that we base our diets instead around starchy complex carbohydrates. These experts emphasize the importance of consuming starches, beans, legumes, tubers, roots, starchy vegetables, whole grains, and whole grain products. Due to the nutrient losses incurred during the cooking process, no cooked food can be viewed as a true whole food. In fact, the cooking process itself actually removes the water from food, with the exception of certain dehydrated foods that are actually rehydrated as they are cooked in water. No food whose water has been removed can realistically be viewed as a whole food. In spite of the fact that fruit is universally promoted as the ultimate health food, and in spite of their own conclusions that carbohydrates must predominate the diet in order for health to be possible, the majority of the world's health professionals fail to see the obvious. A fruit-based diet is the finest possibility we have for developing optimum health. Starch and grain-based diet proponents still broadly miss the mark where optimum nutrition and health are concerned. These complex carbohydrate foods lack in areas such as vitamin C, soluble fiber, and several 100,000 phytonutrients. The experience of eating them can't compare to the ease, simplicity, cleanliness, and natural satiation of eating sweet fruit. With utmost respect for the superb results of Pritikin's low-fat plan in reversing heart disease, Horn points out the following. Although Pritikin's low-fat regimen is nothing short of miraculous in terms of reversing heart disease, a healthy heart does not ensure a healthy person. Pritikin's emphasis on grain, and interestingly its excess protein, which averages only 12% of calories, creates other health issues, ranging from arthritis to cancer. Horn's book presents a compelling and spellbinding argument against the consumption of grains. The reversal of heart disease and its associated problems is not the be-all and end-all of health and longevity. There are other things to consider besides restoring good circulation. Unsticking the blood is only the first step in optimizing health. The second step is to get the blood's chemistry right. Pritikin had taken the lipo from lipotoxemia, but much toxemia still remained. When he grouped the natural sugars contained in fruit in with other sugars, Pritikin had made a fatal mistake. Cooked grains create a condition known as acid toxemia. People who adhere to starch and grain-based diets eventually fall victim to cancer, arthritis, chronic fatigue, hypothyroidism, and a host of other health challenges. A diet of grains and cooked vegetables provides most of the vitamins. However, vitamin C, the most important vitamin of all for the maintenance of tissue integrity and immune system function, and the most easily destroyed by heat, is seriously lacking unless the diet also includes a great deal of fresh fruit. Complex carbohydrate foods are nutritionally inferior to fruits and vegetables, which are the two highest sources of vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. Grains, for example, are low in vitamins A, B, C, and E, as well as sodium, calcium, sulfur, and potassium. The phytic acid in grains is an anti-nutrient that drastically reduces zinc absorption. Legumes are low in vitamins A and C as well. Both grains and legumes contain more protein than I would recommend eating in quantity, their percentages averaging in the teens and 20s respectively. Grains, starchy tubers, and legumes create nutritional, digestive, and health problems for those who eat them. Even when soaked and raw, grains are acid-forming in a body that needs to be slightly alkaline. The gluten-containing grains, primarily wheat, but also rye and barley, contain at least 15 opioid sequences, which are strongly addictive, morphine-like substances that have potent psychoactive properties and produce serious neurological disorders, constipation, urinary retention, nausea, vomiting, cough suppression, and other symptoms. Gluten intolerance, celiac disease, contributes to or causes a wide range of other diseases, including asthma, arthritis, chronic fatigue, Crohn's disease, type 2 diabetes, depression, eczema, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, lymphoma, and gastrointestinal cancers. Gluten intolerance may also be linked to autism, schizophrenia, and several autoimmune disorders. Most people who attempt to thrive on a high-carbohydrate diet devoid of fruit run into health problems. Primarily, this is because most starchy carbohydrates are completely unappealing if served as is. The most common and dangerous excitotoxins include NutraSweet, aspartame, and MSG and its derivatives, which show up on food labels as innocuous-sounding ingredients like hydrolyzed vegetable protein, autolysis yeast, yeast extract, textured protein, soy protein extract, sodium caseinate, natural flavoring, and spices. Excitotoxins are substances that react with specialized receptors in the brain in such a way as to lead to destruction of certain types of brain cells. These highly addictive neurotoxic substances accelerate aging and stimulate the nervous system. Our commonly consumed cooked foods, meats, and refined grain products are extremely low in fiber. In fact, animal foods contain no fiber. Many health-minded people, thinking they are doing their bodies a favor, endeavor to eat whole-grain complex carbohydrates to get fiber in their diets. Unfortunately, these health seekers have been misled to believe that the fiber in grains is good for us. This is not true. There are two broad categories of fiber, referred to as soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber is an essential nutrient, one we cannot make within our bodies and must therefore eat, found primarily in fruits and to some degree in vegetables. It absorbs water and helps to keep the stool bulky and soft. It functions as a sticky, gel-like absorptive medium to keep all substances moving through the intestines. Insoluble fiber is found primarily in grains. Pectin and guar are the two most common soluble fibers. They are used in recipes as thickeners because of their ability to hold water. They also slow sugar absorption from the intestines, functioning as a built-in protection that prevent the sugars in fruits from being absorbed into the bloodstream too rapidly. Ironically, in their isolated form, pectin and guar are being used by the medical establishment in the treatment of diabetics, while doctors insist that diabetics should not consume fruit. The insoluble fibers in grains, raw, sprouted, or cooked, however, are harsh on our delicate digestive tracts. Since they do not absorb water, their edges and points remain sharp. These fibers literally scrape at the delicate walls of our intestines, irritating them and causing a thickening of the intestinal wall. This makes the fiber less irritating, but also reduces the body's ability to absorb nutrients. This irritation of the intestines and colon is what gives bran its reputation for encouraging bowel function. The body senses an irritant and attempts to expel it as rapidly as possible, along with whatever else is in the colon at the time. Digestive maladies are often the outcome of consuming insufficient fiber or fiber that is too harsh. The soft soluble fibers found in fruits and vegetables are necessary for optimum digestive and colon function. If the ingredient list includes corn syrup, fructose, galactose, sucrose, dextrose, maltodextrin, dextrin, maltose, levulose, lactose, or almost any word ending in O's, refined sugars have been added. If people don't eat lots of fruit, they typically eat something sweet at almost every meal anyway. Orange juice, sweetened cereals, jellies, jams, sweet rolls, and sugar and coffee ensure that the day starts off with sweets. Refined simple sugars, a category that includes table sugar, are the classic all-time best examples of empty calories, that is, calories without their full complement of original nutrients intact. When people add such empty calories to other ingredients to create a dish, I refer to the finished product as junk food. The meat and dairy industries like to point fingers at sugars, declaring them synonymous with empty calories. They have done such a good job of marketing that to this day most people do not understand the differences between refined simple sugars, empty calorie junk foods, and the simple sugars in fruit, health food, thinking that sugar is sugar. Whole fresh fruit is the third and most overlooked source of carbohydrates. Fruit comes in an intricate, highly nutritious package that matches our nutritional needs better than any other category of food. I recommend that virtually our entire carbohydrate intake, 80% of calories or more, come from the simple sugars in whole fresh fruit. These sugars are the optimal fuel source for humans. The soft water-soluble fiber in whole fruits allows their sugars to absorb slowly and gradually, so high blood sugar is not an issue. Fruits never require cooking in order to be delicious and nutritious, and our bodies digest them quickly and easily. As a category, fruits are our least toxic food choice. They digest cleanly, leaving only water as residue, which is easily expelled from the body. I see no healthful reason to look anywhere else for the vast majority of our calories. The health, nutrition, energy, and human performance results available on a high-fruit, low-fat, raw vegan program eclipse even the proven, consistent benefits of low-fat, starch-based diets. Fruits are designed to be our staple. They contain everything required to be the source and mainstay of our nutritional sustenance. We have been trained to think of fruit as a treat, something to eat at the end of a meal, or perhaps as a snack between meals when nothing else looks good. But I invite you to begin thinking of fruit as real food, and even as a meal unto itself. Eating 80% of our calories in the form of uncooked simple carbohydrates can become easy and natural once we learn to eat a moderate amount of nuts and seeds, all the green leafy vegetables we care for, and great quantities of whole, fresh, ripe, in-season fruit. As a species, humans originated in a warm climate and eventually spread throughout the tropical belt, the warm zone that extends through most of the 1,000-mile range above and below the equator. This is the environment where tropical fruits abound. If you have a goldfish, cat, or dog, do you change the very nature of their diet every time you move? Do zoo animals get entirely different classes of food depending on the latitude of the zoo that houses them? Viewed in this way, it becomes obvious that we must honor the unique dietary requirements of each species based on its particular digestive physiology. Further, many people live in climates that only produce food for a few months of the year. What should they eat the rest of the year? Humans are anatomically and physiologically adapted to the food of the tropics, predominantly fruit, as are almost all of the tropical creatures. Every one of us lives almost every minute of our lives in a miniature tropical environment, keeping ourselves in the tropics by the judicious use of clothing, bedding, and heat. Even the Eskimos surround themselves with enough clothing and keep their homes warm enough so that they can spend almost all of their time in the tropics. People not only love fruit, they are designed for fruit. Wherever humans have chosen to venture on planet Earth, they have carried this physiological predilection for tropical fruit with them. Protein, 10% maximum. Although I have met many people who have begun to or are considering vectoring their diets away from animal foods, I rarely meet anyone who has a reasonable response to these queries. Usually they tell me that we need large quantities of protein for energy, or to stay strong, or to keep us from getting sick. Nothing could be further from the truth. Protein's primary function is growth, which is negligible in adults, as well as repair from injury and replacement of worn-out cells. Fewer than 5% of Americans eat more than 21% of their calories from protein, with a bell curve ranging from 11 to 21%. Despite the advertising hype of the meat and dairy industries, humans require an extraordinarily low amount of protein in their diets. Eating a mere 10% of our total calories as protein is sufficient. Mother's milk provides on average approximately 6% of calories from protein for growing infants. This should be ample proof that adults do not need more protein per calorie than this, as infants, with their extremely rapid rate of growth, have the highest need for protein per calorie of all humans. Proteins, or more accurately, amino acids, are the building blocks of living cells. Once we have done our growing, we have very little requirement for the raw materials of which we are made. The 2003 US recommended daily allowance for protein is 0.36 grams per pound of body weight, or 0.8 grams per kilogram, 1 kilogram equaling 2.2 pounds. The RDA calculates these numbers for a typical sedentary female and male who eat 1600 and 2200 calories per day respectively, arriving at a suggested 44 grams of protein for a female and 55 grams for a male. In his book, The China Study, renowned Cornell University professor emeritus of nutritional biochemistry T. Colin Campbell states that we require only 5 to 6% of our total calories to come from protein in order to replace the protein we routinely lose, and that, quote, about 9 to 10% protein has been recommended for the past 50 years to be assured that most people at least get their 5 to 6% requirement, unquote. Given that cooking substantially deranges protein and other nutrients, we can safely consume far less raw plant protein and still be assured of sufficient nourishment. Quote, there is little evidence that muscular activity increases the need for protein, except for the small amount required for the development of muscles during physical conditioning. Bodybuilders following the 80-10-10 program have found that if they supply sufficient calories from carbohydrate, their protein needs go down dramatically, and their energy to train and their muscular growth both increase. Proteins are complicated molecules made by assembling simple building blocks, amino acids, together in a polypeptide chain. Some 20 different amino acids are used to synthesize proteins, 8 or 9 of which are designated essential, depending on whose information you read. The term essential in nutrition means that the nutrient in question must be eaten or otherwise consumed, as the body cannot synthesize it. We do need all of the essential amino acids, but we do not have to eat them together or even each day. Dietary protein is not the only source for building the proteins we need. Instead, our bodies efficiently recycle between 100 and 300 grams of our own protein every day. We have an amino acid pool from which to build new proteins. We add amino acids to the pool by breaking down the proteins we eat and the proteins in our bodies. When we calculate the caloric-nutrient ratio of a week's worth of food consisting strictly of a variety of raw fruits and vegetables, it generally weighs in just shy of 5% of calories as top-quality protein. A few ounces of nuts or seeds puts us at around 8% protein, well into the adequate and healthful range. The vast majority of our commonly consumed quote-unquote protein foods, meat, eggs, and dairy products, as well as all nuts and seeds, contain such an overwhelming amount of fat that the protein numbers go way down as a percentage of total calories consumed. For example, eggs contain more than 60% fat. 70% lean ground beef also weighs in at 60% fat. Cheddar cheese contains 72% fat, cream cheese 88%. Almonds and sunflower seeds each contain 73% fat. In truth, there really is no such thing as a high-protein diet, at least not one in which protein comprises the majority of a person's calories. Too much protein in our diets is associated with all manner of health impairments, including such symptoms as constipation and other digestive disorders that often lead to toxemia, toxic blood in tissues, and eventually cancer. Autoimmune dysfunction, arthritis, and all other autoimmune conditions, premature aging, impaired liver function, kidney failure, osteoporosis, and many other degenerative and pathogenic conditions result from eating more protein than we need. Protein-based foods are highly acid-forming in the human body, even the high-protein plants such as legumes. This is because their predominant minerals are the acidic minerals, chlorine, phosphorus, and sulfur. To maintain homeostasis, the body must counterbalance the acidity caused by excess protein consumption. Unfortunately, it does so in part by taking a precious alkaline mineral, calcium, from our bloodstream. The body replaces calcium into the bloodstream, where calcium levels must remain relatively constant, by removing it from our bones and teeth, setting the stage for osteoporosis and tooth decay. In my experience, about 5% of calories from protein, especially when it is high quality and unadulterated by heat, is adequate and healthful. On a whole food diet that provides sufficient calories, there is no such condition as a protein deficiency. A brochure from the Vegetarian Society of Colorado says, quote, "Studies in which humans have been fed wheat bread alone, or potatoes alone, or corn alone, or rice alone, have all shown that these plant foods contain not only enough protein, but enough of all of the essential amino acids to support growth and maintenance of healthy adults." Unquote. In developing nations where insufficient food is available and people are literally starving to death, protein/calorie malnutrition conditions known as marasmus and kwashiorkor do exist, but these do not occur in developed countries. The symptoms, extreme emaciation, lassitude, and muscle wasting, resolve equally as well by the introduction of high carbohydrate or high fat foods as they do from the consumption of concentrated protein, and usually better. Protein deficiency, it turns out, just is not the cause of these problems. It is simply a shortage of food, a chronic severe deficiency of calories that causes people to literally digest their own muscle tissues for fuel. Fat, 10% maximum. The U.S. Department of Agriculture recommends that 20 to 35% of our calories be consumed as fat. This advice is significantly skewed to the high side by the financial and lobbying influence of the U.S. dairy and meat lobbies. Professionals, as well as many dietitians, nutritionists, sports scientists, and other health experts, agree that the magic percentage could be as high as the teens, but not much higher. Only industry-influenced government bodies recommend that we should limit fat consumption to 30% of our total calories. The relative percentages of fat, protein, and carbohydrates in an athlete's diet should not vary, regardless of whether the athlete runs the mile or the marathon, lifts weights or plays table tennis, shoots skeet or puts the shot. It is wrong to think of fats as being all bad. Fats are a concentrated source of fuel, providing more than double the calories per gram of either carbohydrates or proteins. They play an as yet not totally understood role in satiation, possibly because they are so difficult to digest. The fat in foods serves as the sole carrier and source of our fat-soluble vitamins. Dietary fat is also the source of the widely misunderstood nutrients known as essential fatty acids. Fat plays many important roles in regulation of various bodily functions. It is essential to our production of hormones, although too much fat will exert an adverse influence on our hormones. It also helps to regulate the uptake of nutrients and excretion of waste products by every cell. Fat is the primary insulator within the body. It protects us against cold and heat, keeps the electricity that flows through our nerves on course, and protects our vital organs from jarring and other types of physical shock. With all the dietary fats available on the planet, a man walking in the jungle with nothing more than his bare hands would have a very difficult time putting his lips on any but a minimal amount of fat, and then only if he hit the season exactly right. Animals that are built similarly to man eat a diet that is very low in fat. They rely upon fruits and vegetables for their calories, not fats. Fatty acids comprise the basic structural unit of all lipids, a term comprising oily, water-insoluble substances that include fats, oils, waxes, sterols, and triglycerides. Overt fats are the fats that you can see, or at least tell, are in our foods. Since our taste buds cannot distinguish fat, we only detect it by the greasy feeling on our hands or lips. To us, fat is tasteless. If a food is fatty, oftentimes people have to be told. Many people are surprised to find out the actual fat content of the foods they eat. All of these foods account for less than half of the fat consumed in the typical American diet. The remainder is often referred to as invisible fat. We call it covert. Covert fats are more hidden. Vegetables, sweet fruits, and non-sweet fruits like tomatoes and cucumbers contain enough fat that should you eat them exclusively, in quantities sufficient to meet your caloric needs, and consume no overt fats whatsoever, you will average between 3 and 5% of your total calories from fat. Eating primarily low-fat fruits and vegetables, accompanied by a very small amounts of nuts, seeds, and fatty fruits, such that the total fat does not exceed 10% of calories, provides sufficient fat to cover all of our nutritional needs. Oils are fats that tend to be liquid at room temperature. Both solid and liquid fats function nutritionally as fat. Both oils and fats exist within walnuts and avocados. Whereas you can feel the liquid oil in a pine nut, you cannot separate the oil from the lettuce. They are one. The 80-10-10 diet does not recommend the consumption of refined oils. The idea that all fats derived from animals are solid while all those found in plants are liquid is inaccurate, although this is true in the majority of cases. The primary exceptions are liquid fish oils in the animal kingdom and solid coconut oil in the plant world. Essential fatty acids, also referred to as EFAs, are so named because they cannot be synthesized. We must consume them in our foods. They play an integral role in the health of our skin, in growth and development, the stability of our heartbeat, and the clotting and flowing of our blood. Not all omega-3 and 6 family fatty acids are essential. Only the polyunsaturated fats ALA and LA must be attained from external sources. Interestingly, current research in nutritional science is questioning whether ALA is actually essential, since evidence exists that the body may be able to synthesize it as well. Thankfully, we needn't worry about this, since both linoleic and alpha-linoleic fatty acids are both common in the makeup of plant lipids. There is no established minimum recommendation for EFAs, but we do know that their ratio to one another is as important, if not more important, than the quantity we consume. Scientists generally accept that early man consumed omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids in roughly a 1-to-1 ratio. This happens to be the same ratio of essential fatty acids found in the human brain. Current recommendations suggest that the ideal ratio is between 1-to-1 and 4-to-1, omega-6 to omega-3. In spite of this ideal range, the average American diet shows a ratio ranging from 10 to 30-to-1, a dietary choice that contributes significantly to the prevalence of inflammatory diseases and other very serious health issues in our nation. This seriously skewed ratio comprises the body's ability to convert ALA into longer-chain fatty acids such as EPA and DHA. On a 2,000 calorie diet, 0.5% of calories from ALA or omega-3 represents 10 calories. This is approximately 1.1 grams of ALA, which falls within the Institute of Medicine's adequate intake levels, albeit at the bottom of the range. This quantity of ALA can be obtained through the consumption of whole, fresh fruits and vegetables, with the occasional addition of nuts and seeds. Adding healthful, very small amounts of overt fats on occasion will ensure your needs are met. Cholesterol is not all bad, but is vital to human life. Some of its many functions include the production of vitamin D and the formation of the bile salts, the sex hormones testosterone and progesterone, and the myelin sheath that surrounds our nerves. Cholesterol is not an essential nutrient for humans. We don't need to eat it. Our livers produce all the cholesterol we need. However, when we regularly consume animal foods that contain cholesterol or saturated fat, we ingest quantities that exceed our physiological needs, with deleterious consequences to our health. Excess cholesterol accumulates and forms plaques within artery walls, leading to atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, decreasing the oxygen-carrying capacity of the blood, disrupting hormonal balance, and sometimes decreasing cell permeability. Saturated fatty acids are so named because their long chain of carbon atoms contains the maximum possible number of hydrogen atoms. In other words, they are saturated with hydrogen. These fatty acids have the highest melting point and are solid at room temperature. Saturated fats are stable molecules and as such are very unlikely to change, making it impossible for the body to do anything constructive with dietary saturated fats. Unsaturated fatty acids make up the bulk of plant fats. Monounsaturated fats contain one double or triple bond. Polyunsaturated fats have two or more double bonds. Hydrogen atoms are eliminated where double bonds are formed. The body adds hydrogen, a process that saturates the fat. In other words, the unsaturated fat molecule is malleable and is subject to change within the body. The body can work with it and utilize it. It then integrates these self-manufactured saturated fats into our bodily structure as needed. Generally, the less saturated the fatty acid, the more easily it can be utilized by the body. The suggested ratio that is best for health has been placed at 20-80, 20% saturated to 80% polyunsaturated. This is an accepted standard in the world of nutrition. Note that the SP ratio of most plants, including nuts and seeds, is ideal, 20-80, or extremely close to it. The proportion of saturated fat to polyunsaturated fatty acids in most animal foods is 80-20, the exact opposite of the ratio we require. As this number skews toward saturated fats in the diet, we see increases in atherosclerosis and other forms of heart disease, the number one killer in the westernized world. It is literally impossible to achieve a healthy SP ratio while including products of animal origin in our diets. Americans consume 1/3 to 1/2 of their calories as fat. In my experience, the number tends to gravitate around 42% for the average fast food connoisseur. The immediate consequences of eating too few carbohydrates can include lethargy, cravings, binging, and emotional instability. Other people overeat fat while undereating in terms of total calories. Such a diet produces weight loss, but it falls far short in some nutrients, while providing potentially fatal overdoses of others. If we minimize one of the caloric nutrients from our diets, carbohydrates, of course we will lose weight. We will have almost halved our calorie intake. However, we have to learn to ignore our natural sweet tooth while living with an incessant and ever-growing craving for carbohydrates. Whether they realize it or not, most people tend to gravitate toward 42% fat, regardless of the type of diet that they follow. Vegetarians quickly learn to recreate all their old favorite foods in a style that is acceptable to their new ethics. Vegetarian pizza may not have meat, but it often has a double portion of cheese and does not lag at all in fat. Vegetarians are generally happy that they can eat familiar foods while feeling no sense of deprivation. In the final analysis, the vegetarian diet averages around 42% fat. Oil generally plays a larger role in the vegan diet than in the standard American diet, as it replaces many of the animal fats. Vegans often increase their use of nuts, seeds, avocados, and olives as well. Vegans think that they do not need to limit their fat intake because they believe that the animal products were the only offenders in their old program. Even if their fat intake remains the same, overall calorie intake often drops when vegans replace animal foods with plant foods, which provide fewer calories per bite. Thus, the percentage of the vegan diet that comes from fat rises. A steady flow of research comes out regularly, relating high-fat diets to almost every type of digestive disturbance, blood disorder, and degenerative disease. Much of this is caused by the body's reduced ability to uptake, transport, and deliver oxygen to our trillions of cells. Too much fat reduces the actual number of viable red blood cells. A high-fat diet not only destroys our health, but it ages us as well. Due to our inability to taste fat, we tend to dress our fatty foods with stimulants and irritating condiments to give them flavor. Across the board, refined oils, including coconut, flax, olive, hemp, almond, borage, and the like, which are touted as pure or special because of their source or careful processing methods, are essentially empty calories not fit for human consumption. They are stripped of the fiber, protein, and carbohydrates that accompanied the whole foods from which they were derived, leaving an imbalanced fractional product that is 100% fat. In contrast, whole food fats eaten sparingly, fresh nuts, seeds, avocados, or young coconut flesh, provide some useful nutrition and are not automatically detrimental to health. Maximum nutrition occurs when our teeth are the first thing to break nature's package, rather than a machine, an appliance, or even a knife. The fiber contained in whole plant foods helps keep fats from going rancid. Shortly after extracting any oil from its source and discarding the fiber, early-stage rancidity and therefore potential carcinogenicity ensues even if we cannot detect it. As rancidity begins to set in, micronutrients become deranged. If calling refined oil empty calories doesn't sit well with you, chalk it up to good marketing, because oil, pure fat, fits the description of empty calories perfectly, as do protein powder, pure protein, and table sugar, pure carbohydrate. When we extract the oil from nuts and seeds in a vain attempt to maximize their anti-cancer properties and concentrate other nutrients, we create often undetectable imbalances within the body that inevitably produce unintended health problems. Rather than treat or suppress the symptoms of any condition, it is always a healthier strategy to remove the cause of the condition. True health is created from the inside out, not through lotions, potions, or other aids. Increasing the amount of high water content fruits and vegetables while reducing fat consumption to a healthful range is the foundation for creating a healthful life. Eating for health requires a shift in thinking from "is this good for me?" to "what am I designed for?" A balanced caloric-nutrient seesaw would be 80% plus carbs with single-digit, less than 10% protein and fats. When this ratio comes from whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic plants, all the rest of your food-related nutrients will be consumed in the optimum quantities for human health. The big surprise: raw fooders average 60% plus fat. As is true of new vegetarians or vegans, when people initially begin incorporating raw foods into their diets, they almost automatically gravitate toward foods of similar composition to the ones they are used to in order to feel satisfied. Almost across the board, raw fooders rank right up there with the burgers and fries crowd when it comes to ingesting fat, almost always consuming 50% of their calories as fat, usually far more. Over time, most people who eat a raw diet refine their menus, eventually ending up eating simple meals, which include more fruits and vegetables and fewer fats. But it takes precious little in the way of nuts and seeds to equal or exceed the percentage of fat consumed by the average American. The high-fat raw foods that well-meaning raw chefs, teachers, and authors promote are very likely to cause in raw fooders many of the same health issues that plague cooked food eaters, including Candida, chronic and intermittent fatigue, and even heart disease. These maladies result in large part from excess fat in the bloodstream. Raw fats are without question far better for us than cooked fats, especially when they come from whole plants as opposed to extracted oils or cooked animal products. But do not let anyone mislead you. The habitual consumption of fatty foods is not a healthful practice. Whether you eat cooked animal fat, cold-pressed plant oil, or whole food raw fats, too much fat is too much fat, and we must recognize its health-destroying potential. Cooked or raw, higher than healthy levels of fat in the bloodstream force fat to precipitate out and adhere to arterial walls, a condition known as atherosclerosis. Hypertension, aneurysm, atherosclerosis, embolism, thrombus, myocardial infarction, cerebral infarction, and other vascular disorders are all related to excessive consumption of dietary fat. Cooked or raw, increased fat in the bloodstream reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of red blood cells, predisposing us to cancer. A lowered blood oxygen level also adversely affects all cellular function, including muscle and brain cell function. Reduced oxygen to the brain results in impaired clarity of thought, poor decision-making, and a dull mind. Cooked or raw, increased fat in the bloodstream requires an increased epinephrine, adrenaline, response in order to drive the pancreas to produce insulin. Following excess stimulation, adrenal exhaustion sets in. Cooked or raw, increased fat in the bloodstream results in increased demand for insulin, known as insulin resistance. Cooked or raw, the excessive consumption of fat has been incontrovertibly linked to the development of cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. When we consume more fat than we require, we almost invariably consume less carbohydrate than we require. Insufficient carbohydrate consumption will result in feelings of fatigue, loss of strength, reduced sex drive, and a general lowering of vigor and vitality. If I found myself on rare occasion with only high-fat raw or low-fat cooked plant food options, I would make one of two choices. Either I would forego eating altogether by skipping that meal, or I would indulge in the high-fat meal and then follow it with a day or more where I eat no overt fat whatsoever. For various reasons, some people find themselves ongoingly unable to eat enough fruit to make a low-fat raw vegan diet feasible for them. For such people, I must admit that eating in the 80-10-10 proportion, regardless of the food choices, wins hands down over the habitually partaking of the high-fat foods popular at raw potlucks, restaurants, festivals, retreats, and workshops. If high-fat raw or low-fat cooked seem your only options, choose the low-fat option every time. All manner of amazing health quote-unquote benefits are attributed to the coconut, but I do not recommend using food as therapy for any purpose. Coconut meat is nearly all fat, the vast majority of which, 80%, is saturated. If you eat a healthful low-fat raw vegan diet and live healthfully, you will not need the benefits of coconut or any other food. I suggest eating and drinking fresh coconuts when you visit the tropics, but otherwise reserving them only for an occasional indulgence. Many raw fooders believe that when they eat a large salad, they are consuming a low-fat meal. However, this is true only when the salad includes no oil-based dressing or other high-fat ingredients. Just 1 liquid ounce, 2 tablespoons of any salad oil transforms an innocent, seemingly healthy salad into a high-fat fiasco. Most fruits have very little fat, usually less than 10% of total calories. A few fatty fruits, notably the avocado and the olive, derive about 3/4 of their calories from fat. Proponents of low-carbohydrate diets and many raw food programs suggest that we eat these high-fat foods in unlimited quantities because they are so low in carbohydrates. We are told that the fats in these fruits have the right SP ratio and should be considered good for us. However, when we eat a large quantity of fatty fruits, we cannot possibly consume enough carbohydrates. If you like being lulled into lethargy, both physically and mentally, by your food, then eat fatty fruits in unlimited quantity. If you prefer feeling energized and sharp-minded, go for the sweet fruits instead. Stabilizing body weight. 3 elements comprise our total weight: water, lean tissue, and fat. Water makes up as much as 70% of our total mass. Lean tissue includes our bones, muscle, and other non-fatty mass. Fat constitutes the rest of our weight. Lean tissue holds more water and is denser than fat. The high water content of lean tissue easily transmits electrical signals, a fact underlying the most common method of measuring body fat percentage, the bioimpedance monitor. In the not-so-distant past, when virtually everyone carried a relatively low body fat percentage and harbored little excess water weight, weight alone served as a fairly accurate predictor of a person's shape. Today, as obesity consumes more than half of the population, weight alone is no longer an adequate indicator of what we might look like. Loss of fat is typically accompanied by a loss of weight, but not always. It is possible to gain muscle and/or water weight while losing fat. We can very easily gain more in water weight than we lose in fat, yielding a net gain in weight. This is true because water weighs much more than fat, volume for volume, so that a little gain in water weight can equal or exceed the amount lost in conjunction with a considerable amount of body fat. Even if you are steadily losing fat, the simple addition of a little extra salt in the diet can negate any potential weight loss. The great volume of water that the body must take on to dilute the toxins in salt in any form results in a net weight gain. It is possible, but not as common, since muscle growth tends to be fairly slow, to exercise enough so that you gain more weight in muscle than you lose in fat, resulting in an overall weight gain. When all other factors remain equal, however, fat loss does result in weight loss. When thin people have a desire to gain weight, they usually fail to recognize that they need to gain muscle, not fat. Almost every client who has ever come to me wanting to curtail their weight loss because they thought that they were getting too skinny actually still needed to lose some fat. What really happens when people begin eating healthfully is that the fat starts falling off and they think they are losing muscle because they never realized how little muscle they actually carry. People in this situation need to gain muscle while continuing to lose fat. This requires exercise. Many people who eat a lot of fat lose a great deal of weight. How can this be? Consuming a diet that is low in carbohydrates and rich in fat can leave people with a depressed appetite, which leads them to eat fewer calories. Also, although some people can handle dietary fat fairly efficiently and still consume many calories, most of us do not digest or assimilate it very well. We cannot be healthy when we are over fat, since our health cannot be better than its weakest link. To the degree that we are over fat, we are also typically malnourished. The more fat, the more malnourished. The obese person who eats only fruits and vegetables is virtually unheard of. We get fat when we eat foods that are less than optimally nutritious, foods that are nutritionally poor and impair assimilation of nutrients. Hence, fatness and malnutrition are inseparably linked. We are shocked when someone we deem perfectly healthy dies suddenly from a heart attack or stroke. But take note, people in perfect health simply do not drop dead. While perfect health is our natural state, it occurs only when we take perfect care of ourselves. For men, a healthy body fat percentage runs in the single digits. For women, the ideal range is about 10 points higher. Women can develop infertility, osteoporosis, eating disorders, hormonal imbalances, and other serious conditions when their body fat drops into the single digits. I equate health with fitness and athleticism, essentially viewing the two as inseparable. In contrast, government, fitness, and medical quote-unquote experts distinguish the athlete from the healthy individual, giving them separate classifications as if it were possible to be healthy and not athletic. Increasing muscle mass is one way to decrease overall body fat percentage. As the percentage of lean tissue increases, the percentage of fat tissue automatically decreases. If you are thin but still carry a higher than healthful body fat percentage, this is an excellent way to achieve your ideal body composition, because increasing muscle mass has the secondary effect of facilitating fat loss. How does this occur? When we add muscle, we increase our body's caloric requirements. Gaining muscle is the only truly healthful way to gain weight and increase size without running the risk of creating hormonal imbalances that result from harboring excess body fat. The only way to gain muscle weight is by asking your body to build through the demands of strength training activities. The simplest method of losing weight is to consume fewer total calories each day than the amount you use. Estimating calories consumed versus calories used can provide a very good assessment of your potential overall rate of weight loss. Another way to achieve a net loss of calories for weight reduction is to make a commitment to add regular exercise into your daily routine. Raw foods do not cleanse, they are simply the foods we are designed for. Consuming them provides the body the necessary energy to relieve itself of toxins that have been held in suspension with water. The body does this through its normal mechanisms, the organs of elimination and detoxification. Weight loss can be dramatic when we are losing water as a result of reducing the body's toxic load. I have seen people lose 25 and even as much as 40 pounds in the first week of switching to an all-raw diet. Rarely does more than a pound or so of this weight loss actually represents a loss of fat. As a rule, rapid weight changes always represent water weight losses or gains. Under no circumstances can anybody lose a pound of fat per day on any diet. Most folks, after a few weeks or months of raw eating, are certain that their diet is causing them to lose muscle. They have never seen themselves so thin. What actually happens during weight loss is that we lose so much of the padding, fat, around our muscles, and also the fat marbled within our muscles. In addition, on a raw diet, we begin to lose the water that we once retained to dilute toxins. This water also added to the appearance of inflated muscles. Many people mistake this excess fat and water as part of their muscle. Hydration is an important factor in all aspects of our health and even our weight. When using a bioimpedance scale to measure body fat, we must consider our level of hydration to obtain accurate readings. The most common way that we become dehydrated is when our toxin intake rises relative to our intake of water. Cooking produces many toxins that cause the body to require additional water. Plain table salt is so toxic that even when extremely diluted, as it is in seawater, it is still deadly. All sailors know that if they drink seawater, they will die of dehydration. Salt must be greatly diluted with water before the body can tolerate it. Alcohol, the second deadly household poison, has a similar toxicity. It acts as a diuretic and causes substantial water loss. Few substances dehydrate and impair us as effectively as alcohol. The second way that we can become dehydrated is when water intake is low relative to the toxin intake. If we are to correctly assume that the necessary amount of water is in our fresh, plant foods before we cook them, we can be certain that an insufficient quantity is left after we cook them. By driving off water, cooking effectively changes the water-to-toxin ratio in food to favor toxins, while also raising the level of toxins in the food. So cooking food results in a double whammy. Not only does it remove water, but a great many toxins are created in the process, increasing our need for water. Some animals, especially the grazers, are notorious for drinking huge quantities of water. The anthropoid apes, however, biologically, humans are classed as anthropoid apes, are rarely observed to drink water, but they can do so if necessary. Drinking water is simply not necessary for the anthropoids. Except for humans, they do not cause their own thirst. They do not participate in the activities, nor do they eat the foods that result in thirst. The third way we become dehydrated is when our endogenous toxin production rises relative to our water intake. Every cell in the body produces toxic waste products as a result of its own metabolism, and many tissues, glands, and organs also produce toxins as a result of their metabolism. As our levels of physical activity or stress rise, so does the quantity of endogenous toxins we produce as cellular output increases. This is one of the reasons that we are told to drink water before, during, and after exercise and other physical pursuits to dilute the toxins we produce. When we lose water more rapidly than we replace it, we can also become dehydrated. Altitude, heat, sunshine, wind, humidity, and exercise are among the primary factors that can cause us to lose water. Drinking huge quantities of water after causing extreme dehydration is not the healthiest option. It does not matter whether the cause is the consumption of cooked, salted, or dehydrated foods or exogenous toxins. Although the solution to pollution is dilution, it is far better to avoid the pollution in the first place. Although dehydration has many symptoms, one of the most common is fatigue. Of course, many factors can result in fatigue, but if you are fatigued, consider whether dehydration might be the cause. Other clear indicators of dehydration include the following. Your urine is deep yellow or dark, rather than almost clear. You urinate fewer than 6 times in 24 hours. 8 to 12 times per day is considered a healthy frequency. You would describe the volume of urine that you avoid as scanty rather than satisfactory. Overcoming the challenges of going raw. Only a few people have continually maintained a completely raw diet over a period of years or decades. For many folks, the raw diet is an experiment that fails rapidly. Initial results are deemed positive when a person has weight to lose, but for those who are already thin, the first response tends to be very negative due to rapid weight loss and subsequent fatigue. Of course, everyone blames the diet, ignoring how they actually applied it. The old adage, practice makes perfect, rings true, but it should be amended to say perfect practice makes perfect. For those who fail early tend to give up rather than persist and pull through. A crucial stepping stone for success in a healthy raw diet is understanding the concept of calories per bite, or caloric density. Raw fruits and vegetables yield far fewer calories per bite than cooked foods or fatty foods, so we must eat more bites in order to consume sufficient calories. Our perspective of normal volume has been skewed by the low water, low fiber, high fat meals we have been eating all our lives. Due to the reduced water and fiber found in cooked foods, we are accustomed to eating small volume meals. By eating cooked foods our whole lives, our stomachs never develop their potential elasticity. Dehydrated foods take up less space than the same foods eaten whole. As with cooked foods, their compact size disrupts our natural satiety triggers, which respond in part to volume. Dehydrated foods also take longer to digest because of their complexity and dryness. For both of these reasons, we tend to overeat dehydrated or cooked foods before we realize we are full. A similar thing happens with dried fruits, which, in addition to being low in volume, also release their sugars more slowly. These two factors contribute to our tendency to overeat them, a phenomenon not common among people who eat whole, fresh fruit. Many dehydrated raw entrees, such as lasagna, pizza, and chili, offer 50 to 80% of their calories from fat, sometimes even more. Dishes of this sort slow digestion, forcing foods to be delayed in the stomach and giving us that stuffed feeling we have to come to associate with satiation, even though they do not contain the volume that our stomachs are designed to handle. The fact is that most people consume their food in an extremely condensed form, cooked, dehydrated, and fatty, and are eating a far smaller volume of food than is truly healthy. This concentration of our food is part of the reason we tend to overeat in terms of total calories. Of course, low temperature dehydration causes less nutrient damage than cooking, but dehydrated foods are nutritionally far inferior to fresh fruit, regardless of processing method. Not only that, but eating them dehydrates us, increasing relative bodily toxicity and requiring yet more water to be consumed to maintain proper hydration. The 8 to 12 glasses of water we are told to drink every day are a good indicator of how low in water, or if you prefer, how toxic our diets really are. The challenge of eating more bites is often one that people are not prepared for, as evidenced by the considerable weight loss common among new raw fooders. After initial water weight losses, if a person still loses weight regularly, he or she is very likely undereating in terms of total calories. Eventually, most people agree that eating more food per day is not a hardship, but one of the many rewards of healthful eating. The 80-10-10 diet is among just a handful of healthful plans that allow you to eat as much of the recommended foods as you care for. One tactic to achieve more bites and to support our caloric needs is to start with several fruit meals per day, approximately 4. Over time, depending on your exercise program and other healthful habits, you will be able to reduce this number of meals down to 3 and then possibly even 2. Also, make a practice of eating just 1 or 2 bites more at each meal than you otherwise would. The elasticity of your stomach will promptly accommodate the extra bites, just as all of your other muscles would elongate if you were to adopt a yoga practice. I must stress, the goal here is not to eat until you're hurt, but to gently encourage your digestive system to regain its flexibility. The goal of hunger is to satisfy a nutritional requirement for carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, enzymes, coenzymes, and all other nutrients. We are driven to eat to fill this need and rewarded by the pleasure of it. Because hunger is the general desire for food, when one is truly hungry, any food will be acceptable. Appetite, on the other hand, is specific. We desire a specific food or foods. Appetite is also the socially acceptable word for craving, which in turn is the socially acceptable word for addiction. Malnutrition is also a powerful appetite trigger. When we lack essential nutrients, we crave food. Unfortunately, malnourished individuals often eat more of the wrong foods in a vain attempt to control their appetites. Fat is a very difficult nutrient to digest. It passes through the stomach and intestinal tract more slowly than other nutrients. Because of this, it is easy to overeat fat and in the process stress your digestive capacities beyond their limits. A stuffed feeling results if you are lucky. The less fortunate end up with digestive ailments of varying severity. Almost every digestive disorder is related to the overconsumption of fat. One of the primary ways we handle painful emotions is to literally eat ourselves numb with dense, hard-to-digest foods, the so-called comfort foods. This is effective because of the nature of our nervous systems. Our bodies have a finite amount of nerve energy at any given time. The digestion of food and the conduction of emotions each demand so much energy that they cannot be performed simultaneously. When we commit to eating a raw diet, we gravitate toward fatty foods to provide emotional numbing, as most fresh fruits are not sufficient sedatives to overcome emotional distress. Usually, this leads to the consumption of exorbitant amounts of nuts or seeds, which are easy to overeat because they do not quickly trigger satiation. Fats have several factors working against them when it comes to satiety. First, fats pack many calories into tiny packages. Because volume is one of the key factors in experiencing satiation, it is difficult to eat enough volume of a fatty food to feel satisfied without feeling sick first. Second, the brain monitors blood sugar levels constantly as a method of determining hunger. As blood sugar levels rise, hunger decreases. No corollary rapid hunger reaction occurs in the case of blood fat, And even if it did, dietary fat takes a relatively long time to reach the bloodstream, often requiring 12 to 24 hours from the time it is eaten. The sweetness of these highly nutritious foods makes them difficult to overeat, and because of their copious water and fiber content, fruits supply relatively high volume in a low-calorie package, further making it difficult to eat too much of them. We have all been taught that sweets will satiate us, and we have come to rely upon this fact by choosing to eat our sweet desserts at the end of our meals. Had we eaten sufficiently of fruit at the start of the meal, it is likely that we would not have desired other fruits. No other food group matches the ability of fruit to satiate us. Judging from the way most people eat, I feel safe in saying that addiction stems from variety. Because the monofruit meal does not excite the body, it is easily digested, it does not leave us dulled and fatigued after eating, but rather engaged and clear of mind. We are left both perfectly satisfied and mentally poised. How do we get volume, nutrients, and simple sugars all at the same time? We eat sweet fruit. Because of its high water and fiber content, fruit provides more volume with fewer calories than any food category except vegetables. Hence, we can meet our caloric needs without exceeding them while fulfilling our innate desire to consume foods in large volume. Because of its high volume, low calories, and abundance of nutrients, including simple sugars, eating a sweet meal predominated by fruit is bound to be satiating every time. 80-10-10 in practice. On most days, you will eat juicy fruit for breakfast, sweeter fruit for lunch, and all the acid fruit you care for before a vegetable-based dinner. It is really that simple. This is not a diet program to be used temporarily, but a healthful eating program for life. I wrote this book to guide people to a low-fat plant-based raw foods diet. No other program exists for this purpose. However, many other low or lower fat plant-based diet programs exist. Some people choose to transition more gradually by consuming fruit for breakfast and lunch with a simple low-fat cooked meal plus a raw salad at night. Over a period of months, the salad and other raw dishes nudge out the cooked components until 100% raw is achieved. For some folks, there is a greater sense of urgency than for others, as health issues can impose themselves powerfully. If that is the case, feel free to transition your diet as rapidly as you can. There is no danger in converting to 80-10-10 immediately. You do not have to think of yourself as becoming a vegetarian, vegan, or raw fooder to be an 80-10-10 fan. Just keep decreasing the fat and increasing the amount of fruits and vegetables you add into your already existing program. I recommend that the transition from standard American raw to 8-1-1 be done as follows. Increase the percentage of whole, fresh, ripe, raw organic plants in your diet at each meal. Increase the percentage of fruit in your diet at the beginning of each meal. Increase the total carbs in your diet at each meal. Increase the quantity of fresh, whole, ripe, raw organic greens in your diet until you reach close to 3% of total daily calories or slightly more. Increase the amount of sleep you get until you can honestly say that you are getting enough each night. Increase the amount of physical activity you perform until it accounts for a minimum of 2/5, 40% of your total calories used. 80-10-10 works out easily and naturally if your calories break down approximately as follows. 90 to 97% from sweet and non-sweet fruits, 2 to 6% from tender leafy greens and celery, 0 to 8% from everything else, other vegetables like cabbage and broccoli, plus fatty fruits, nuts, and seeds. You can generally accomplish this with 2 or 3 large fruit meals during the day, plus a large salad in the evening. Fruit predominates heavily, yet you consume as many greens as you like. As a rule of thumb, you should plan on having about 5% of your calories in the form of nuts, seeds, avocados, nut butters, and the like. On a 2,000 calorie diet, you should be shooting for overt fat consumption in the neighborhood of 100 calories. If you really overdo it on fatty foods, you will notice it right away and likely again the next morning. The tiredness, foul mouth, slow digestion and elimination, and other sensations are too pronounced to ignore. They are great motivating factors to bring you right back to the joys of the straight and narrow 80-10-10. You will have to eat a much larger volume of whole fresh fruits and vegetables to obtain the same number of calories that you would from cooked meats and starches, because raw fruits and vegetables are not as calorically dense. They contain a large amount of water and fiber, essential nutrients to be sure, but these two items add a great deal of volume to our food. Another obstacle most people must overcome in order to succeed with the 80-10-10 raw diet is the fear of consuming fruit for the major portion of their calories. Nature intended humans to have to cover large expanses of ground on foot, to climb trees, and even to swim when necessary in order to obtain food and warmth. The resulting fitness level would be considerably higher than that of the average American, as would the average calorie output. As more food would be consumed, so would a greater number of nutrients be available. Good nutrition literally hinges upon us being fit enough to be healthy. With the above in mind, I suggest that a healthy athletic person should utilize at least as many calories in physical endeavors as they use for the resting basic metabolic rate. Resting BMR is equivalent to 10 times your ideal body weight. This means, for example, that a 150-pound man who uses 1,500 calories as his baseline should also use at least another 1,500 calories in his activities for the day, on average, for a total of 3,000 calories. Good nutrition literally hinges upon us being fit enough to be healthy. By this I mean to say that even the most perfect diet will never result in true health unless it is accompanied by high-level fitness and all of the other essential elements of healthful living. The 80-10-10 diet may seem like a huge shift in your lifestyle in the beginning, but as the rewards for taking care of your body unfold, you will come to see that the benefits of living this way far outweighs the cost. Developing 80-10-10 as a lifestyle will enhance every moment of your life to come. The 80-10-10 motto is simplicity at mealtime, variety throughout the year. As you become accustomed to this lifestyle, you will discover the joy of eating seasonally and anticipating the taste sensation each new bounty of fruits brings. Don't worry about your caloric-nutrient ratio at each meal or even each day. The 80-10-10 guideline, at least 80% of calories from carbohydrates and at most 10% fat and protein, is intended as an average, something to strive for over time. The best way to really understand the caloric-nutrient ratio and get a true sense of the level of fat in your own diet is to weigh your food and enter numbers in an online diet analysis program for about a week. Remember that each individual's digestive capacity is different, as is their level of exercise. Both of these factors affect our ability to absorb nutrients efficiently. As you mature in this lifestyle, your natural digestive fire will increase. Frequently asked questions. What you do most of the time will have a big impact in your life. What you do rarely should be considered exceptions. The impact of exceptions does not accrue like the impact of that which you do with regularity. Nonetheless, whole, fresh, raw plant foods, with all of their original components intact, including water and fiber, are by far the most healthful. The healthy raw food diet that I recommend in this book is made up of whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic plant foods. It is predominated by fruits and allows for all the greens that you care to eat, plus small quantities of nuts, seeds, and fatty fruits. I do not recommend an all-fruit diet. In my experience, we must eat vegetables, especially dark leafy greens, in order to experience optimum nutrition and ideal health. I recommend that 2 to 6% of our total calories consumed on average come from greens. I do not recommend the consumption of animal-derived foods of any kind, including honey and milk, for reasons of health, ecology, and compassion. Most raw food diets obtain a high percentage of daily calories from fats by including oils and significant amounts of avocado, nuts and seeds, and sometimes coconut meat and olives. These diets tend to be unsustainable since too much fat, even raw fat, causes health problems and results in the underconsumption of carbohydrates. In a vain effort to compensate for the nutritional insufficiencies of these diets, people often resort to the use of supplements and stimulants. According to most sports physiology texts, the difference between fast and slow metabolic rates is very small indeed. Most texts agree that the BMR rarely varies much more than about plus or minus 5% from person to person of similar body size and design. Body surface area, scientists have proven, is the biggest factor affecting BMR. At most, BMR variations represent less than 100 calories out of the 2,000 to 4,000 that most people eat per day. Textbooks suggest that BMR differences typically account for only 1 to 2% of total calories consumed. Those who convince unsuspecting new raw fooders to steer clear of fruit and gorge on fat do succeed in accomplishing one goal, the creation of nutritional inadequacies. This opens the door for selling us nutritional supplements in a vain attempt to compensate for the very deficiencies that result from consuming a high-fat raw diet. No essential nutrient exists in meat, grains, legumes, or dairy that is not also available in fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, and in a form that is easier to digest. Indeed, many vital nutrients, such as soluble fibers and the thousands of phytonutrients, can only be garnered from plants. For millions of years, most humans and their ancestors lived a gatherer lifestyle in a tropical environment where large amounts of easy-to-pick fruit were readily available to meet their nutritional needs. The human diet was likely entirely plant-based and eaten without the application of fire or heat. Accordingly, the human digestive and eliminative tracts developed to process raw fruits and vegetables for fuel and growth. We are biologically designed to obtain our nutrition from uncooked fruits and vegetables. Only within the last 10,000 years has cereal agriculture allowed humans to trade their frugivorous diets for cooked grain-based fare. People's bodies remained the same, but the food they chose to eat began to vary for the worse. The human body has not had sufficient time, evolutionarily speaking, to alter its digestive system to meet this fundamental dietary change. You are not following 80-10-10 if less than 2% of your total calories come from vegetables and leafy greens. For true health, I recommend consuming 2 to 6% of calories from leafy greens. For 4% of your calories to come from vegetables on a 2,000 calorie diet, you would have to eat roughly a pound of greens a day. Your caloric intake is insufficient to maintain your desired body weight. You burn less than 40% of your total calories through physical activity, at least 800 calories per day if you average 2,000 calories. Your habitual sleep patterns doesn't meet your body's needs. You eat all day long rather than 1 to 4 meals a day. You lack emotional poise. Your lifestyle is sufficiently stressful to cause your system ongoing adrenal exertion. You expose your fully or substantially unclothed skin to moderate sunlight less than 30 minutes per day. Eating sweet fruit carbohydrate in insufficient volume to produce a feeling of satiation results predictably in carbohydrate cravings and disordered eating behaviors. Almost every raw fooder who goes back to eating cooked foods finds himself eating cooked carbohydrates, bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, corn, lentils, and beans, time and again, until they figure out that they simply are not eating anywhere near enough fruit. If they don't go back to cooked starches and the fats that make them taste good, they are generally driven to eat concentrated and refined carbohydrates such as candy, chocolate, alcohol, pastries, cookies, or dried fruits. Numbing out is very real in a physiological sense. With the exception of strenuous physical activity, the two most energy-expensive tasks our bodies commonly undertake are breaking down foods in combinations that have a high digestive demand and processing intense emotions. In general, we must do one or the other. As one lightens the digestive load by switching to raw foods, the body suddenly has more nerve energy to conduct emotions, and emotions suppressed over the years begin to emerge. This unexpected challenge proves overwhelming for many people. Until people learn to properly deal with their emotional baggage, it is likely that eating raw foods will allow uncomfortable emotions to surface. They will find themselves going back to eating cooked foods for the emotional comfort that they bring. Without the negative emotions, we could experience no positive emotions, as they are two sides of the same coin. They are a part of us like all other parts, and by rejecting them, we only turn away from an aspect of ourselves that is demanding our undivided attention. The second type of emotional eating involves felt attachments to specific cooked foods. Such attachments often originate from an attempt to recreate a past event or moment in our lives that we remember as positive and yearn to experience again. In the same way that drug addicts never successfully duplicate the unique high of their first drug experience, no matter how many times they try, eating cooked food never quite generates that specific emotional experience we are looking for. Instead, we get disappointed, and then we eat more cooked food to numb our awareness of the disappointment. It takes a lot of insight to understand that although those emotions are important and the experiences were valuable, eating cooked food will not bring them back. We must learn to let go. and generate new positive experiences in the present moment. Learning how to eat a raw food diet properly takes time, patience, and yes, effort. Although I provide a blueprint for doing it healthfully, most people find it challenging to adopt a raw diet 100% the first time out unless they get professional guidance. It seldom occurs overnight and in fact can take years to accomplish. Newcomers do not have enough perspective to be able to discern the valid information from the dangerous or the sound science from the well-marketed infomercial. We can quickly end up with a situation where the blind are being led by the semi-sighted. My advice is to be certain that you seek guidance from someone who has reached stability in his or her own food program. Of all foods, fruits are the richest in vitamins and water, and second richest in minerals and fiber, while vegetables and leafy greens are richest in minerals and fiber, and second richest in vitamins and water. Vegetables supply minerals and fiber so far in excess of our needs that the quantity supplied in fruit actually comes closer to meeting our needs. Fruits, being far higher in calories than vegetables and thus capable of fueling us adequately, should comprise the majority of our diets. Some fruits, however, do actually fall short in terms of minerals, so it is important to include some vegetables in our diet to make up for the eventual lack that could develop on a fruit-only diet. Vitamin B12 deficiency is not limited to vegetarians and vegans. It is common among meat eaters as well. Not because they don't eat enough B12, but because they don't properly produce and absorb it. If it is true that plant and animal foods can contain B12 and that we make it within our bodies as well, then how is it that we find vitamin B12 deficiency in humans? This is an extremely complex matter, but I will discuss 4 reasons for this phenomenon in a very simplified manner. 1. Our produce no longer contains vitamin B12. When we add chemicals to the soil, we destroy not only pests and the bacteria that produce vitamin B12, but also the entire pyramid of soil life, which begins with organic material, then fungi and bacteria, but also includes mites, then predatory mites, springtails, and worms. Most agricultural soil in the United States contains only 1 to 2% organic matter, a level that qualifies as biologically dead. 2. We wash our produce. In the past, when people ate lettuce, celery, carrots, and other vegetables fresh from the ground, the soil left clinging to the vegetables often contained vitamin B12. They also obtained the nutrient from the bacteria-laden dirt that accumulates near the stems of apples, peaches, pears, and other core or stone fruits. But between the chemicals we apply to the soils and our obsessive fear of germs and bacteria, we effectively eliminate this source of the nutrient as well. 3. We cannot absorb the B12 we eat. Meat eaters easily consume enough B12 because the bacteria that make it live in the digestive tracts of livestock, and it is distributed in the muscle meats of the animals they eat. As described earlier, vegans who eat organically grown plants from richly composted soils and who don't compulsively wash their produce should also get plenty of the nutrient. In both of these cases, vitamin B12 deficiency is usually only a problem if you lack a chemical called the intrinsic factor, which causes people to be unable to absorb B12. 4. Medical B12 standards are artificially high. People who eat a grain-free diet not supplemented by this poor imitation of the natural nutrient often test low for B12 even if their levels are healthy and they are totally asymptomatic. This is because their B12 levels are being compared to those of people who are consuming a B12 supplement in their food at almost every meal. It may be better to eat commercially grown raw vegetables than to eat cooked or steamed organic vegetables, but it is a difficult choice. Organically grown produce generally contains more vitamins and minerals than conventional produce, and the fresher it is, the better. Organic produce generally contains little or no pesticide residue in comparison with conventional produce. Nevertheless, the amounts involved are not usually critical to health, and it is far more important to avoid the pathogenic effects from cooked food. It is common to undereat fruit and overeat fatty foods when beginning the raw vegan diet. I recommend that you input your food information into chronometer.com or on nutridiary.com, fitday.com, or another similar website for at least a week to make sure you have the relevant information about your calories and caloric-nutrient ratio. The more you practice eating meals of just fruit, only fruit, and nothing but fruit, the easier and easier it will become to consume appropriate volumes. If your fruit meal does not hold you until the next mealtime, at least 3 to 5 hours later, then you did not eat a sufficient quantity of food. Mono-eating is the practice of eating one particular food for an entire meal in sufficient quantity to produce satiation until the next meal. When it comes to fat, the source doesn't matter so much. Fat is fat. Fat travels from the lymph system directly into the blood. Too much fat will thicken the blood, causing the red blood cells to clump together so they cannot deliver oxygen to the cells. Excess fat also blocks the action of insulin in bringing sugars to the cells, which leads to diabetes and other blood sugar problems. True hunger is a sensation that occurs primarily deep in the low part of the throat, much like the feeling of thirst, but a bit lower, about where the concave notch appears between the collarbones at the bottom of the neck. The sensation might be described as resembling a dull ache. The stomach sensation we commonly associate with hunger is often the result of its muscular walls shrinking after completing the digestive task of the last meal. If a perceived feeling of hunger is accompanied by feelings of faintness, stomach pangs, headaches, or other discomfort, it is actually a sign of withdrawal from harmful substances. A healthful person can skip a meal or two with no feelings of weakness or distress. When one is healthy, true hunger signifies no urgency for food, since the body knows it has reserves for its use in time of need. You should be at all times comfortable in your body. Extracted sodium chloride in any form is an irritant and is toxic to the body. It deadens the taste bud's ability to sense sweet, sour, or bitter, which is why salt users often say that food has no taste without salt. Retards digestion and excretion, and upsets our critical natural water balance. We must take care to distinguish here between extracted sodium chloride salt, which is deadly, and the sodium and other mineral salts that occur naturally and abundantly in whole plant foods, which are vitally important nutrients needed by every cell of our bodies. Eating a variety of vegetables, especially celery and tomatoes, provides all the organic salts and other minerals our bodies need in just the right amounts and combinations we require. Consuming sodium chloride of any kind, including sea salts and other highly marketed, pricey specialty salts, is a self-destructive practice. All forms of vinegar, including apple cider vinegar and balsamic vinegar, are highly toxic to the human body. Vinegar is made by diluting 1 part acetic acid, a common poison found in any chemistry laboratory, in a bottle with a skull and crossbones, with 19 parts Vinegar is made by diluting 1 part acetic acid, a common poison found in any chemistry laboratory, in a bottle with a skull and crossbones, with 19 parts water. Vinegar excessively stimulates the thyroid gland, leading to hyperthyroidism and eventually hypothyroidism and concomitant health issues. Generally, the lower the water and the higher the fat content of a whole, fresh food, the better it will take to freezing. As for fruits and vegetables, the practice of freezing should be minimized but not necessarily eliminated, as it is one of the least damaging ways to preserve foods. Dehydrated foods can never be as nutritious as the whole, fresh foods they started as. Nutrient damage has been shown to occur even if the water is replaced. The use of dehydrates is a personal decision, but dried foods should always be considered at best a compromise, second in quality to whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic fruits and vegetables. In natural hygiene, there is a saying, if you can't make a meal of it, it is likely not people food. When people hear this statement, they often view it as draconian and idealistic, for it rules out the consumption of virtually all spices, seasonings, and condiments. Yet think about it, no creatures in nature season their foods, nor even generally combine more than one food in a meal. Herbs and spices like garlic, onion, curry, cumin, ginger, cayenne, chili powder, and oregano contain alkaloids and other toxic chemicals. These seasonings stimulate our taste buds and nerves while delivering toxins to our nervous systems. Their use should be avoided or at least minimized. They act as irritants in the digestive tract, often causing the body to produce mucus for protection. They also function to disguise the bland or noxious taste of cooked foods and seduce us into consuming foods that would not attract us on their own. The medical profession and supporting industry, the medico-pharmaceutical cartel, operate from the theory that thousands of separate illnesses exist whose symptoms can be treated or suppressed by ingesting synthetic chemical compounds. The natural hygiene approach is entirely different. We recognize that genetically inherited abnormalities exist, usually arising from generations of poor dietary and lifestyle choices, and that very little can be done about these. Otherwise, however, we propose that there is only one illness, toxemia. This is a condition of unclean blood and tissues caused primarily by improper diet and lifestyle. Unchecked, toxemia and its attendant enervation, nervous exhaustion, get progressively worse over the years, leading to all manner of symptoms. People find this very difficult to comprehend, but we must remember that the symptoms are not the disease. Rather, symptoms are actually the body's methods of coping with toxemia. Pharmaceutical medicines are toxic substances that you introduce into your system at your own peril. Rarely are any claims made that a drug will cure any particular chronic disease. At best, they usually profess only to substitute one set of symptoms for another. The fact that pharmaceutical drugs are sold legally over the counter or are prescribed by licensed physicians does not make them seem any less dangerous to health than street drugs. Over 100,000 people die each year from the side effects of these patented medicines. No one has ever died from eating an adequate supply of fruits and vegetables. With a few exceptions, it is preferable to consume the whole foods rather than to extract and drink part of them. Drinking fruit or vegetable juice without the pulp being present to slow the absorption rate of the nutrients can spike the blood sugar and throw your blood chemistry out of balance. One exception is fresh squeezed citrus fruits, since a significant portion of the pulp is generally retained with the juice. The other quote-unquote exceptions are to blend fruits such as melons into a watery slush, or to make fruit smoothies out of fruits like bananas, strawberries, peaches, or mangoes. Liquefying a blender full of whole fruit turns it into a thick smoothie while keeping the entire nutritional package together. Blending a whole tomato, celery, and orange makes a thick, tasty salad dressing. You have no need for supplements if you are eating a calorically adequate, low-fat, plant-based raw diet, engaging in frequent vigorous activity, and otherwise living a healthy lifestyle. All the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients any body needs are amply supplied through the variety of fruits, vegetables, and leafy greens found in a healthy full diet. That said, the health of each individual always takes priority over any philosophical position. In individual cases, it may be necessary to supplement the diet nutritionally during the initial phases of lifestyle change rather than risk potential health damage. One example of this is a possible need to supplement B12. The amount of nutrients that we require across the board is far less than conventional guidelines would have us believe. When the body is in a fit and healthy state and all systems are working optimally, we experience superior absorption and utilization and overall greater efficiency in every aspect of cellular function. When we slow down and gum up the works with fat, however, it's a different story. People have come to equate nutrition with pills, powders, and potions rather than with whole foods from nature. Ironically, you generally won't find a single food of any kind in most health food stores. Their products, no matter how whole or natural the ingredients, may shift symptoms, but do not and cannot create true health. If health foods were truly whole and natural, they would contain all of the water, fiber, and other vital components that nature provides them with, and their sale would require no packaging or labels. The marketers neglect to mention that too much of that nutrient is harmful in a variety of ways, not the least of which is inevitable imbalances that result when we consume supplements of any kind. Most supplements are concentrated from plant foods, and despite our American more is better mindset, the body does not appreciate these unnatural concentrates and has to work to expel them, similarly to the way it has to eliminate toxic residue from cooked foods. On a healthy diet, supplements are not needed. On a less than healthy diet, supplements do not make up for the nutrition that is lacking. Like all other primates, we were made to function perfectly on the amount of nutrients found in fruits and vegetables, in the quantities that we would eat those foods whole. Juicing, dehydrating, concentrating, and refining those foods introduces excesses and nutritional imbalances that our bodies were not designed to deal with. I maintain that the optimal raw food diet consists of whole, fresh, ripe, raw organic plants in the 80-10-10 caloric-nutrient ratio, period. The problem in the case of raw foods is that people do not feel great when they eat insufficient carbohydrates or when they continually underconsume total calories. They experience voracious hunger and they binge, falling off the raw food wagon repeatedly. They develop uncomfortable and unhealthy relationships with food. Their health deteriorates as their diet becomes erratic.